Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to the Committee of the Whole meeting of Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. Just a reminder that this is a Committee of the Whole meeting and no decisions will be made here today. There will only be recommendations that will go to our next regular council meeting on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 for consideration. A couple of reminders for today's meeting. Members of the media may sit in the upper balcony at the reserved media table. All other guests, please take a seat in the first floor gallery. If that is full, there is overflow seating on the second floor in the Victoria Room, where you will be able to see and hear the meeting. We live stream the meeting on your YouTube channel, and the recording is available after the meeting. Because meetings are accessible to the public in this way, video or audio recordings by members of the public is not permitted in council chambers. This is to ensure that all attendees and those who come to make a deputation feel at ease. Thank you for your cooperation. I will also point out that this morning's meeting is not being broadcast on Cogeco, but this afternoon's meeting will. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda? No. Councillor Perry, Councillor Richardson, all in favor? And that passes. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? Seeing none, should any arise during the course of the meeting, advise the chair will deal with it accordingly. Moving on to item 4. Item 4 is the growth management strategy for 2025, and we'll deal with deputations first. Our first deputant on item 4.1.1 is Mr. Jim Webster and Mr. David Johnson. You have 5 minutes, gentlemen. Just press the button at the bottom, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'll be brief. Mr. Johnson is going to speak at greater length in my behalf. I provide you with a bit of a handout about my concerns concerning my property at Fenelon Falls Corporation Black Bear Estates. My concern that it was not addressed in the growth management study. I've been back and forth with the city since January of, I think it's 2023, 22 years and a month with respect to developing this property for residential purposes. And through all the changes in provincial policies and various reasons that it has not proceeded in that time period, I've been assured that it would be addressed and considered in the growth management study. As near as I can tell, after reviewing the Fenelon Falls section, it has not been considered at all. I fully understand that ultimately the city in the next year or two, in dealing with the official plan and secondary plans, will make its determinations about possible expansion of development boundaries. My concern is if the report as is proceeds, that even if ultimately the council decides to allocate some development to my property, because as it is in the report, it's all allocated to what I'll still refer to as Fenelon Trails, or preferred site, then Fenelon Trails can use that report, if it's left as is, to oppose any allocation to my property. And if we end up at OLT or whatever may be down the road, that will be prejudicial to me, and it can leave the council looking embarrassed or in a difficult situation. So I am asking that the report not proceed and it be sent back to planning and the people that prepared it, Dylan and others, to get an explanation as to why the Black Bear property was not considered, or if for some reason it was, why it was dismissed, because we've heard nothing from them. So at age 77, and lived in Fenelon Falls for 77 years, hasn't been away at school. My family's been there since the 1860s, originally a half a mile north of this property until they went broke in the 1890s, elsewhere in the area. So I'm dismayed about the fact that there's no reference to the Black Bear property. If for some reason it shouldn't be developed, then nobody's told me in the last 20-odd years. So those are my concerns, and it's not the responsibility of this council as to why it hasn't been addressed, but I think I deserve an explanation. And again, I caution you about proceeding with it as is for the reasons I've explained, and I've mentioned that in my handout, so I thank you for your attention. If there's no questions, I'll sit down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be very brief. Thank you for the opportunity. I think what I would ask you to look at is page 128 of the report. That if you look at it, as Jim has said, in the entire document there's no reference to Black Bear Estates. There is a reference in the document to a preliminary preferred site. And that's in a blue star, and it happens to be on the Fenelon Trail site. And that's fine. No concerns about that. But we would suggest to you that there should be a second blue star, and that should be on Mr. Webster's property. And we would also suggest that Mr. Webster's property be added as a preliminary preferred site so that there are, in fact, two in the Fenelon Falls area, and that would promote at least some competition and keep a competitive marketplace, which we think is very important. It is our view that in order to do this properly, you should defer the final acceptance of the report, because as Mr. Webster has outlined, we think it is prejudicial to only identify the one site. And I want to emphasize, we are not opposed to the development of other sites in the Fenelon Falls area, quite the contrary. We look forward to the competition, if you will. But to not even mention Mr. Webster's property in the document, to me, is like starting a race with the other guy halfway around the track. Definitely an advantage, and we think that advantage should be neutralized by a reference to Mr. Webster's property, Black Bear, in the final document. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see if there are any questions. Could I have a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Perry, Councillor Warren. Any comments or questions for the deputants? Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you to you both for coming and presenting today. Having reviewed these, especially the Fenelon Falls section of the growth management strategy, I see that there's a criteria there that was run and resulting in a geographic location mentioned as the preferred, or the most desirable place for the growth, especially for those 38 hectares. Are you aware, from your presentation, you weren't aware of any consideration of other alternative or other proposed sites, is that right?
Well, we're aware in the document it talks about the consultants looking at 50 other sites, I'm assuming citywide. We can only assume that we were one of them. But I find it difficult to fathom that, given the history of the potential development of the site and the dialogue that has gone on over the last few years that is not even mentioned.
But at this point, you're not aware of how that was assessed?
No.
In terms of the case of Black Bear and the lots that you were looking to develop, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, all in favor? Thank you. I hope you stick around for the presentation and discussion on the report, and I think you'll find that maybe some of your concerns are addressed. Okay? Moving on the agenda, the second deputation is by Matthew Corey of Malone Givens Parson Limited. Mr. Corey.
I'm here online.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, sir. And good morning to you and the rest of committee. Thank you for having me here, and I apologize for not being there in person. I had some scheduling conflicts. I always try to attend in person. Really, I'll be fairly brief, but there is a significant ask, and I'm happy to answer any questions on it. We had submitted, and we've been undertaking on behalf of Flato, who, as you know, has significant lands on the east side of Lindsay, and they're subject to the zoning order that was put on them. And as for agreement with the city, we've been working on the master development agreement that both Flato and the city have agreed to come up with the right forecasting for those lands, the planning of those lands, and the timing of when those lands will come in. We submitted all of this to your staff and to the team that's around the growth management work back in November. And I had the opportunity to delegate to the task force and also mention that work to them as well, and ask that it be incorporated. We'd also been asking throughout the whole process that the work that we've done, and also reciprocally to see the technical work that the city's team has done, be reviewed together. We never received the technical work after months and months of requesting it. So I know there's copious amounts of reports that came out on Friday. My review at a very high level, and I with respect to the city's team, it's fair to say I haven't done a thorough review. I wasn't able to accomplish that just over the 2 days we had it. But at a high level, it doesn't seem like any of our comments have been incorporated, or I'm not sure how they have been incorporated. So what I would ask committee to consider today is a friendly amendment to the recommendation to the staff report, and a request that committee council ultimately direct staff, when they're finalizing and this report is being endorsed, that they reflect the phasing that we have shown in the submissions we've made. And figure 4 in our submission specifically shows the proposed phasing for the GMS memo on the Flato lands with regards to the zoning order. And without going into copious amounts of detail, although I'm very happy to do that if committee wishes, I think there's a whole policy regime behind the fact that when you have these zoning orders, there is a prioritization and it needs to be reflected. And certainly I know in speaking with my client, Flato, they are more than prepared to move in terms of the timing and the phasing that's being shown in the submissions we've made. We certainly ran it by our engineers, Carl Repka at Counterpoint, and our client. We're very confident in the fact that we can work with, continue to work with you and with the city to make those timeframes happen and deliver housing that's much needed in the city, but also in the province, in accordance with the intent behind what that zoning order is. So more than anything, right now, we don't want to get off the GMS on the wrong foot. As you recall, there was a commitment by our client to council at the time when the zoning orders were happening to work with the city and to come up with inputs into the GMS, the growth management strategy. We've done that. We provided those. I just don't see them being reflected in the work and the proposed phasing plan that's being put in front of you and in front of the city, and respectfully requesting that direction be given to incorporate, at least on our lands, the phasing that we're looking for. And as an upshot, the change would be practically that most of the phasing in what your consultant has put forward and staff are putting forward for the Flato lands is post 2041. We see most of the phasing being pre 2035, 2038 on the western portion of the lands. And then indeed some of the further out lands to the north and to the east would be closer to 2041 and a bit beyond 2041. So it's a bit of a tweaking of the phasing, and the timing is really what we're after. And I think it reflects all the good work we've done and the cooperative spirit we're working with the city on in that regard. So really asking again, the council, in specific, we have a correspondence I believe the committee has seen, and it's on the agenda. It's figure 4 under section 5.2 of that. And I think I can share my screen. No, I can't share my screen. But if you look at page 13 out of 21 on that correspondence, that is where that proposed phasing is. That's what we're asking committee consider amending the recommendation of the staff report to direct staff to include that phasing schedule. So with that, to committee, thank you for hearing us. I'm very happy and would love to answer any questions or answer any questions you have. But I just wanted to reiterate before I stop that we've been trying to work on this. We've been providing input to it, and we have not had the benefit or seen any of the technical background work. We still don't have the actual technical background work, but we have the summary of it in the reports, and we only got that on Friday, and was very disappointed to see that notwithstanding we've been working closely and putting in input, it wasn't reflected in any form or fashion, especially given the nature of the zoning order and especially given the policy set that the city has to operate under the provincial policy statement and the Planning Act, where any decision by committee or council has to be consistent with Section 2 of the Planning Act, specifically provincial interest. And I think there's very much a provincial interest that these lands proceed in a timely fashion, and I don't see that being reflected. And I think that's a very concerning issue as you consider endorsing this report. And I think it can be fixed quite easily with endorsement of Flato's phasing plan. So with that, thank you. Very happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you. I got a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor Warren, seconder. Deputy Mayor McDonald. Questions or comments? Councillor Warren. Councillor Warren.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your deputation, and I want to thank you for all the great donations that your company has given to our community, such as the hospital and the theater and other organizations. So I'm just going to put this out there. With all the growth going forward, it would be wonderful if you folks would also look at doctor recruitment as a possible donation. That's one thing that we're having a real problem with. We're competing with other municipalities to get signing bonuses. So I'm just putting that out there. Thank you very much for your consideration.
And thank you, Councillor Warren, for that. It's always good to know how. And just to be clear, I'm with Malone Given Parsons. I'm just a consultant for my client Flato. So, but I know they're listening, and I will. I hear you loud and clear. And I think doctor recruitment is an issue in many places. The one benefit to having growth occur, and certainly that's partly why we want the phasing corrected so they can move ahead quickly. The more they can move ahead and build the homes, the more opportunities there are for all kinds of partnerships. If they're pushed out, to be blunt, quite some time, the ability for them to do that diminishes is just from a business perspective. I can't speak on their behalf, but I think they're more than happy to help in any way they can on doctor recruitment, not least of which, if they need to on these new lands, provide ample space for commercial or medical offices or other things. I know in other communities, Councillor Warren, that the issue is there's just no space as well. Like the doctors don't have a space to inhabit. They don't have a place that they can locate. that we're obviously one of the first phases of the Flatlands has a new commercial site right on Verulam, just to the east of it. That's always an opportunity to do that too. But I just want to underscore for them, obviously, being able to proceed with the development as anticipated in partnership with the city opens the door to all those things. If it's later, it's later. Everything's later. But I will very much pass that on to my client, that they need to partner and help you with that as well.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks again for coming today. Just a quick question for clarification only. When we've demonstrated the East Lindsay MZOs and looked at the phasing approach, is your concern is you don't agree with the phasing that we've already put in place?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is my concern. The concern is that the phasing that's proposed, which I believe is on page 173 of the primary growth management report, it shows the majority of the Flatlands in post 2041, and even the lands we currently have a subdivision in for to 2031 to 2041. It doesn't reflect what's actually happening in terms of Flato trying to proceed and work with the city on those lands in terms of timing for even the phase, what Flato calls phase 2 of their lands. I don't want to, there's too many phases because there's phases of your growth management study and phases of their development, but let's call it stage 2 of their lands. We had done a lot of work to come up with what we thought and what we truly believe is the realistic phasing of those lands and how it should and could proceed. And that's what we had submitted and requested be incorporated into the city's phasing work. And it has not been. And it's pushing out the lands quite farther and longer than is anticipated. And I think that is not appropriate given the urgency that comes along with and the priority that comes along with an MZO. So we, yes, absolutely asking, please, that committee consider a friendly revision to the recommendation on the staff report to direct staff to use, for at least for the Flato MZO lands, the phasing schedule and timing that we have included and asked for. And the rest, they obviously the city will know best how to phase the rest of the lands in accordance around the rest of Lindsay.
Thank you very much.
Does that clarify things?
No, it clarifies
okay.
it because clearly we've outlined how we were looking at the phasing, and your statement today is clearly stating that you don't agree with that phasing. So thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions or comments, all in favor of receiving the deputation? And that passes. That's the end of our
Thank you.
deputations. We do have correspondence. We have correspondence from Matthew Corey, Principal Planner, Land Economist, Project Manager, Malone Gibbons Parsons Limited, on the Growth Management Strategy update. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive the correspondence? Councillor Richardson, Councillor Perry, all in favor? And that passes. Moving on to the presentation, we have the Growth Management Strategy presentation. Jamie Cook, Managing Partner, Watson & Associates, Economist Limited. Shayla Taku, Consultant, Watson & Associates, Economist Limited. And Rory Bakish, a partner with Dillon Consulting Limited. Folks, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Good morning, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you again today to present to you the final results of the growth management strategy. I'm going to have Shayla, or I think the clerk's going to bring up the presentation, and then we can begin. We have a short presentation for you today to summarize the key findings of the study. And just while we're waiting for the presentation to come up, I'll just jump into the agenda. So we'll just want to provide a brief update on where we've been since we last spoke in November of this year. And then wanted to provide a update on the stakeholder consultation briefly, that you've heard about some of that today. And then we'll be speaking to some of these points further through our presentation, both myself and Mr. Basque. And then I'll go through a summary of the key recommendations. I'm just wondering if there is if the presentation could be loaded up. If there's any challenges
believe
on that,
it's up
we
there.
can load it up on our end.
I
Oh,
think,
is it up? Okay. I'm not seeing it actually. Okay, I see it now. Okay, so if you could go to the slide number 3 on project schedule. Next slide. So in terms of our project schedule, we've gone through this schedule with you several times. I just really wanted to follow up on where we've been over the last couple of months. We last met in November of last year to provide a summary of the key technical findings. At that time, we had provided a technical memo to outline some of the key findings that were coming out of this report. Since that time, we finalized the report, which you would have received last week. We also met with the task force one final time in January to discuss the final results of the study and hear their feedback. At that time, we also heard from several of the key some of the key stakeholders that some of them that you've heard again today, and discussions were held at that task force meeting, and additional follow-up discussions have also been held with some of those key stakeholders. So we're back here today to present our final results. This will conclude the growth management strategy reporting and overall process, and this will then form a foundational document to guide the city through its official plan review and official plan amendment process. The next slide, please, on slide 5. So in terms of stakeholder consultation, we had received comments from 4 key stakeholder groups. We heard from Mulligan Parsons today, representing Flato, David Johnson, representing Jim Webster. We also heard today again. We also heard from the Biglieri Group, representing Bromont, and Diagram Developments and Tor Construction. Some of the key comments that we've heard are comments to revise the phasing plan, specifically both the Bromont and Flato lands that are under the Minister of Zoning order. We have had a look at those lands. I will speak briefly to that when we get into the phasing schedule. We've had requests for further details with respect to the technical analysis, and we have prepared a supplementary package in addition to the detailed report that you received last week. I believe that package is in the hands of the city planning department, and they are reviewing that, and will be forwarding that additional supplementary information along to MGP, as well as others who may be requesting it in a short time. We had some further questions with respect to the location options of urban expansion in Fenelon Falls. Rory's going to speak to that in greater detail today. We also had some broader questions about the rationalization of the urban boundary in Fenelon Falls, which Rory's going to speak to. And then more broadly, questions about the nature of the technical work and whether and how that technical work ultimately aligns with the current provincial policy framework and the requirements of the provincial planning statement. And that's been laid out in detail in the report, as well as comments being provided through our response through that correspondence with the stakeholders. So moving on into the recommendations. The first recommendation is on slide 7 with respect to the growth forecasting and technical analysis and land needs analysis. You've heard from me before on this. I will be brief, but I do want to point out a few key things. So in terms of the overall forecast, we are recommending a high growth scenario for the city out to 2051. This forecast identifies a total population of 130,000 people by 2051 for the city. So just to put that into context, that forecast is 13,000 people higher than the initial growth forecast that was provided through the growth plan to 2051. So it's a much higher rate of growth. It's a rate of growth of 1.6% annually. Comparatively, in the last 20 years, the city's been doing a rate of about 0.6%. So it is reflecting a significant increase in the overall amount of urban and to some extent rural development, but largely urban development within the city. That does have significant implications for housing needs and urban lands. In terms of employment, we're also recommending a slightly higher forecast of 40,600 jobs by 2051. The amount of housing required to accommodate that is estimated at about just under 49,000 housing units by 2051. That's about 300 households a year that would be required annually from 2021 to 2051. Historically, the town has done a fair bit lower than that number, quite a bit lower than that number over the last 20 years. Relative to the pledge, we're relatively close to that pledge. We're still a little bit under that pledge number in the next 10 years, but keeping in mind that the forecast that we're showing here only represents housing for new residents associated with population growth. There could also be additional housing to accommodate latent demand, to accommodate those that are already living within the city, including affordable or attainable housing units that would be above and beyond that number. So just want to point that out. With respect to the key targets on intensification and density, those are two key measures that formerly the growth plan had required us to look at. The provincial planning statement also identifies us to look at identifying intensification targets. And we have recommended a lower intensification target. The current target for the city is 30%. We are recommending a 20% target. And I've noted in the past that when it comes to these broad targets, traditionally, in my opinion, the bar has been set quite high with respect to intensification. And we've found throughout the work we've done here and throughout other municipalities in the outer ring of the Greater Golden Horseshoe that target is difficult to achieve in smaller communities in the outer ring, because you don't have the extensive market for higher density development, and you don't have the larger urban centers with the urban structure and infrastructure to support large scale intensification. So primarily for those reasons, we have recommended a lower intensification target of 20%. When it comes to density, the bar has been set fairly low on density. The province identifies for fast and large and fast growing municipalities a minimum target or a density target of 50 people and jobs per hectare. We're recommending for the current target for Kawartha Lakes is 40 people and jobs per hectare. We're recommending a target of 45 people and jobs per hectare on average throughout your urban settlement areas in Lindsay, Fallon Falls, Bobcaygeon, and Omemee as a broad average, recognizing that those averages are going to vary between urban settlement areas. We have not conducted a urban or a land needs assessment in the rural area, and I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail throughout the slide deck. I just also wanted to point out that about 90% of the growth that we've identified for the city as a whole has been identified for the urban settlement areas. And so the vast majority of growth that we are identifying in the city of Kawartha Lakes is being identified to the urban settlement areas. Next slide. So the next slide deals with the proposed phasing plan for the city. This is for Lindsay. We have identified a phasing plan only for the urban settlement of Lindsay. And the key reason for that is because when we look at our projections of growth, which I've identified are assuming a very high growth scenario, 13,000 people beyond the growth plan projection, we've identified that even under that high scenario, the settlement area of Lindsay will have a surplus of urban land by 2051 when you consider all of the lands that are designated in their designated growth areas, as well as the MZOs that are located both within and outside the existing designated settlement area of Lindsay. So essentially, even with this high growth forecast, there's simply more land than we need to accommodate growth by 2051. We recognize that these lands are being planned and ultimately will be developed in the fullness of time. And we've also identified through this phasing plan that's been designed through a series of phasing principles and criteria, that it is a guide, and that ultimately it is subject to change and is subject to monitoring, and it's intended to be a guide that's nimble to allow for changes over time if significant delays occur to lands that are identified within this phasing plan, particularly those that are identified early in the phasing plan. But we recognize that given the amount of land and given the overall likely pace of development that we expect to see, even under an ambitious scenario, that not all of the development is going to be able to occur in phase one. So we have identified a phasing plan that I've mentioned that looks at three broad phases. The first phase are the lands that are identified in yellow. These are lands that are within the existing urban boundary. They are located in most cases adjacent to the built-up area of the Lindsay built boundary, and they are lands that are actively approved or draft approved within under current development applications. The next phase are the lands that are identified in the light brown. These are lands that either are currently undergoing development applications or are vacant but are inactive, don't have active applications. These lands are also within the urban boundary within the city, the Lindsay settlement area. And the last phase are lands that are vacant lands, again, that are not actively in development applications, that are outside of the existing urban boundary of the Lindsay settlement area. So those are the three broad phasing schedules that we've identified. And again, we have stressed in the report that it's important that this phasing plan is monitored regularly, and we've held discussions with the City Engineering Services Department to ensure that we're aligning this phasing schedule as closely as we can to the servicing plan for Lindsay. The next slide deals with location options for Fenland Falls and Bobcaygeon, and I'm going to turn that over to Rory for further discussion.
Thanks very much, Jamie. So the future of Kawartha Lakes and its urban growth is not centered solely on Lindsay, although Lindsay will continue to be the largest nexus in the community. There's growth also anticipated for Bobcaygeon and Fenland Falls, and I'm actually happy to share that as a principal observation arising from this study. It's good to see those other communities seeing growth and prosperity too. That's exactly what we hope to see for the future of Kawartha Lakes as a jurisdiction. So in Bobcaygeon, the anticipated growth in terms of urban expansion in totality is 23 hectares, and it breaks down in three ways. So as you see on the map on the screen, there's two blue-gray stars, one on the northwest part of Bobcaygeon, another one in the northeast. These are opportunities where the current urban boundary can be expanded to accommodate development on lands that are suitable for development. They don't have development constraints. They're adjacent to existing development. We can extend roads and services. It's a logical extension of the community. And so the 23 hectares can be shared in part between those two geographies. However, the owners and or future developers come forward to make their applications to facilitate the build out of those lands. So those are the first two in Bobcaygeon. The third one in Bobcaygeon is in the south of the community. There's a very old subdivision that had been around that has since lapsed. It was known by some colloquially as Bobcaygeon Shores, and the urban boundary is still in place in and around the old Bobcaygeon Shores development. To the south of that, there's another interested landowner that would like to do some development. They are outside the urban boundary. So that kind of golden yellow star there reflects a future where there's an opportunity to potentially adjust and refine the shape of the boundary in the south portion of Bobcaygeon, such that we could create a development opportunity for both of those landowners. So instead of it being potentially tied up entirely by Bobcaygeon Shores, it could be shared by two land owners, and there would be two developments moving forward, which is again good for the community. Good to have different options for where people choose to live. What I'll now do is move over to Fenland Falls. So again, Fenland Falls is expected to see growth and prosperity in the years to come. In the matter of its urban boundary and the expansion that has been forecasted and that we've been able to justify thus far. The scale of that is 38 hectares of urban expansion. For this to work in Fenelon Falls, it's a two-step process. The first part of that process, I'd like to draw council's attention to the a little bit to the northeasterly and easterly side of Fenelon Falls and the shape of that boundary. You'll happen to notice that that shape of the boundary is very curvilinear in nature. It does not reflect the logical shaping of a boundary as we would do it today using common planning practice. So what we need to do is we actually need to refine and reshape that boundary. We may move it in some directions, expand it, and then commensurately we would have to retract it. So for every hectare we go out, there's a hectare that we would pull in. Basically, it's a one-for-one exchange until we get to a baseline boundary through the step one rationalization of Fenelon Falls. That gives us a rational baseline boundary to work with. And then moving on to step two, we have 38 hectares of urban expansion to then add upon that. And so that can be shared with any number of potential development interests moving forward in the future. We are aware that TOR Construction has taken over a project that would have formerly been known by the community as Fenelon Trails, and they're advancing a development proposal. Applications come in, it's been deemed complete, it's under review by staff. So we know that that's on the books. And with respect to the comments made earlier, certainly understand that there's other development interests in the community. And as we move forward from the growth management strategy exercise, there is lots of opportunity for continued dialogue in regards to the ultimate future for growth and development in Fenelon Falls and for other applications to come forward. That's how planning works in Ontario, and that's the way that the Planning Act is set up. It's to allow applicants to make applications. Jamie, hopefully that was a good walkthrough for Bob Cajun and Fenelon Falls. I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Rory. So moving along through our recommendations, the next recommendation deals with planning for the rural area. So if we can go to that slide. So as I pointed out, the growth analysis report and GMS, this broader GMS study, is a study looking at the city in its entirety. But when we look at where growth is expected to be largely accommodated and how the provincial policy documents and the city's official plan, how they direct growth, it's clear there's a hierarchy that's established that ultimately the urban settlement areas are to be the priority area for growth and fully serviced settlement areas. But the province and the city also do identify that growth can occur in the rural area, and we acknowledge that these rural areas are critical, particularly the rural settlement areas within the city that form economic clusters of activity within the surrounding rural area, and their growth, sustainability, and vibrance is very important for the city as a whole. But we also recognize it's very difficult to allocate growth, minimal growth that we've identified for the rural area throughout that vast geography. And it's not required as part of the technical requirements, either the previous requirements that were laid out by the former growth plan technical documentation, and now the current documentation also does not require us to conduct rural land needs analysis assessments. We think that accommodating growth within the rural area, we're recommending that should be done through the policy framework that's laid out within the 2024 provincial planning statement, as well as the current policies that exist within the city's official plan. And so ultimately, growth within the rural settlement areas and surrounding rural areas needs to be rationalized within that planning context. And that could ultimately result in potential changes to growth and settlements over time. But at this point in time, we are not recommending any adjustments to rural settlement area boundaries within the city at this time. We have identified that in addition to reviewing applications within the context of provincial and local policy, if there was to be applications, in our opinion, that would significantly alter the pace of development within the rural settlement area, we do feel that those applications should be reviewed thoroughly through a development impact analysis to address the financial, servicing, and other planning and other implications of growth and development that those applications may have. Next slide, please. So in terms of this recommendation with respect to climate change, we have noted throughout the report that the city is comprised of a blend of vibrant urban and rural settlement areas, and those, as well as a very extensive natural heritage system. And collectively, that blend of urban and rural settlement and the extensive natural heritage system that comprises Kawartha Lakes has represented a key draw to the city and underlines the key success of the city from an economic development perspective, as well as from a sustainability perspective. And so, building on that, we have recommended that the city continue to advance its climate change policies related to mitigation and adaptation, and the city should continue to build on the healthy environmental plan and follow an environment first principles with respect to future growth and planning. Next slide. So with respect to monitoring, this is something that we've underlined in several areas of the report with respect to phasing, but also with respect to the broad term monitoring of growth. We know that we are living in as we've experienced in the last several days, we're living in times where we have extensive uncertainties around economics. There's considerable changes that we're facing with respect to the outlook for population growth, and ultimately how that impacts our needs to accommodate newcomers through a range of housing options. And we've experienced a significant amount of legislative reform to address all these factors over the last several years. So it is very important that we develop a comprehensive monitoring system. At Watson, we have developed a comprehensive web-based approach to monitoring growth, which ultimately allows us to dynamically update development activity, monitor trends, and report out on how we're actually tracking to our growth trends, how we're managing our supply of inventory of lands, and ultimately being able to report back on these trends to key decision makers in council. So we have initiated a follow-up meeting with key senior staff to talk about potential opportunities to implement this growth monitoring tool for the city of Kawartha Lakes. Next slide. Lastly, there's a few comments I wanted to make on recommendations with respect to employment. The first is on looking at potential employment expansion areas. I've mentioned this in the past that as we're looking out to 2051 and beyond, there's a need for us to ensure that we're developing the city's urban communities and rural areas in a way that we're ensuring that these communities are complete and balanced with respect to providing a broad range of housing options, but also opportunities for employment. At this time, we have not identified a significant need for urban expansion for employment areas to 2051, but we acknowledge that the provincial planning statement does allow us to plan for employment areas beyond the 2051 horizon, and we are recommending that by the full build out of the Lindsay urban settlement area, which by saying that I mean by the time that those MZOs are fully built out, we would expect that there'll be a need for additional employment areas as well. And so we've identified two expansion areas to accommodate a need of just over 40 hectares. The first area is located in the northeast area of the settlement area, east of Highway 36. It's roughly 90 hectares in size, so larger than the minimum requirement. We've also identified another option that's identified to the south west of the settlement area, west of Highway 735, south of Kent Street. Both of these locations have been reviewed broadly with respect to municipal servicing, impacts on the natural heritage system, agriculture impacts, as well as growth management and land use considerations and market potential. We're not identifying the need to select a recommended option for expansion at this time through the GMS, but we are noting that that there is a need to proactively plan for employment area lands, and these are two locations that we are recommending that would require further consideration. Next slide. So in addition to that recommendation, we've also noted in the report that there has been a change to the definition of employment areas under the Planning Act, and that is now in force as of last October through the 2024 provincial planning statement. Essentially, the province is taking a more narrow definition of how they define employment within employment areas, which is essentially more strictly defines employment areas as industrial areas with some opportunities for ancillary uses that would support those primary industrial uses. The definition does not permit standalone uses in sectors such as office, institutional, or retail uses. So there is a need for the city to further review its inventory of employment areas and ensure that the inventory does correspond and is consistent with those that broader policy direction. We provided a number of recommendations within our growth management strategy to help the city with that process. We also have taken a review of a number of existing applications for the employment area removal that would come out of the employment area designation and into a community area, so a designation that would be a residential or mixed use designation. So there have been some recommendations already, but further review will still be required to assess the city's entire employment area inventory. And we have recommended that in reviewing that, you should be looking not only at the broad provincial planning direction, but also local criteria for removal. So it's not just about broader needs, but it's also about the site-specific attributes of these sites with respect to their location, site configuration, surrounding land uses. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure that we are protecting the city's valuable employment areas and ensuring that they are designated for employment use. But there could be some situations where it's deemed that a removal is appropriate under the current policy framework. Next slide. And so lastly, building on that definition, we've also identified opportunities to introduce additional policy language in the official plan with respect to employment areas to explore approaches to increase the market readiness and identify strategies to remove barriers to investment within existing employment areas that are designated but undeveloped at this time within the city or underutilized. We've also identified opportunities for quality enhancements within employment areas such as additional urban amenities, design standards, as well as consideration of employment supportive uses that could be provided to enhance the functionality and attractiveness of your employment areas. We've also identified the encouragement for considering eco-industrial principles as well as encouraging intensification of your existing employment areas within the city. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Warren, Councillor Richardson. Questions and comments? Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. First of all, Mr. Cook, a great presentation. This is very clear and concise and much appreciated. I have two questions. The first one is back to Fenland Falls. I thought we were going to get an explanation on the Black Bear Estates. I'm still left, I'm new to this, so I don't know what's happening there. If someone can, either Mr. Backish or Cook can respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I'll pass that one over to Rory to provide a response.
Yeah, I'm pleased to offer some feedback there. As I understand in a conversation with Director Leah Berry, the folks involved in Black Bear Estates have actually submitted materials to the city of Kawartha Lakes, and so they've submitted it for pre-con, which means that they do have intentions to then at some point file a formal application. So we're in a preliminary stage at this point, and we do look forward to the applications coming through. And as you heard me say, what we do in Ontario is we welcome applications so that developers can make their desires known, and then we can figure out, as a municipality, how to accommodate that development within the framework of the community. And that right now is the differentiating factor between the Black Bear and the Tor construction. Tor construction has filed an application. They've been deemed complete. The application is currently in staff and circulation. So again, we look forward to the Black Bear interest to continue to advance forward with the process as we have it in Ontario, and the desire is to work with them as much as there's a desire to work with Tor. And ideally, the goal is to fit as much development as possible into Fenland Falls that can be justified, and encourage that growth and prosperity for the community.
Thank you. My second question is to Mr. Cook. If we could go to slide 12, please. Thank you. I love that slide. But my question is the intensification targets. It was originally 30%, but based on other projects you're working on, that 20% is realistic. But I just keep thinking with the housing situation, we should be going smaller, tighter, more vertical. I'd love to get back to that 30% intensification. It's not really a question, I guess. It's a comment, but do you think it would go in that with changing demographics, housing availability, affordability, economic uncertainty, and legislative reforms? What do you think in forecasting? Do you think it will start swinging back in that higher intensification in the near future?
It's a great question through the chair. One thing I want to maybe just point out at the outset is that even though the target is lower at 20%, because the growth is much higher now at 1.6% population growth and 300 units a year, the absolute amount of intensification is actually higher than it's ever been, even under 20%. So it is important to look at these objectives and targets with respect to both the percentage of intensification as well as the absolute amount. So I just want to make that point clear. I think your point is really valid about the demographic opportunities. There are a number of demographic and affordability issues that are encouraging more opportunities for intensification. We have an aging population. We have newcomers that are in the younger age groups that are coming to the city as well. Those age groups typically have a higher demand. Sometimes we call that word propensity, and in the business here of land economics and planning, they have a higher propensity for higher density. So we have acknowledged that is an underlying driver for that additional growth in the absolute levels of intensification. We also have clearly challenges with respect to affordability, and we need to provide a broader range of housing across all structure types and tenures. So we need more rental housing as well as different varieties of ownership housing to accommodate more attainable housing options and affordable housing options. So that's all been discussed in the report, and these are key drivers that we've identified that are helping to acknowledge or that are acknowledging the increasing demand. It's also important to note that the targets are simply that. They're not necessarily, they're not to be reviewed as caps on growth. So if you are able to achieve that 20% intensification target, there's nothing preventing you from ultimately achieving a higher rate of intensification. If you were to be experiencing more demand and more applications coming in, we would welcome that target to be exceeded. But we have also acknowledged that when we look at trends within comparable communities in the Outer Ring and beyond, you tend to have a less opportunity for intensification than larger urban centers, places like, say, Durham Region or other areas in the GTA where they have higher order transit and transit, other traditional transit opportunities. They have stronger markets for higher density housing relative to the city of Portland Lakes. So there is a limit that we feel that we can realistically identify, and we need to make sure that we balance that objective of what's reasonable for the built-up area, because that has implications on how much growth we're accommodating in these designated growth areas. So and ultimately expansion areas. And we do feel like we've struck the right balance there with respect to those targets. And we've had a lot of discussion on that with the task force and with yourselves, and obviously the senior members of staff at the city over the last 4 years on this. So those are my initial thoughts. I could spend more time on it, but I think I'll stop there in the interest of time.
Yeah. No, that was a great explanation, and thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And thank you very much for all the work in preparing this report. And I also want to thank Councillor Richardson, acknowledge her work as Councillor Liaison on and representation on the Growth Management Strategy Task Force and the community volunteers, including outstanding Ward 3 resident Chris Appleton, who was the chair of the Growth Management Strategy Task Force, and the work that all of city staff did, led by Director Barry. I just have 3 quick questions, if I could, and the one goes back to the selection of the designated preferred expansion location that Mr. Webster has raised and Councillor Joyce had just mentioned. In looking at the report, I know that a lot of factors were taken into consideration: abutting and adjacent land, natural heritage, open spaces, transportation, servicing capacity. I'm just wondering if you could answer, we see what preferred location was selected. What other locations were selected, and were those criteria applied to them as well? And if so, how did they fare?
I'm pleased to speak to that. I think the question is really centered on the Fenelon Falls community as opposed to the other communities where we looked at a variety of different locales for urban expansion. So I'll just focus therefore on Fenelon Falls. The key finding is the 38 hectares of development. That's basically what we have to allocate, assign, or hand out as it relates to an expansion of the urban boundary. So in looking at the Fenelon Falls community, we are looking at locations adjacent to the urban boundary where there's a viability for development that is not constrained. In fact, there are opportunities to develop in a variety of different places in and around Fenelon Falls. So that does not ultimately become the primary differentiating factor at the end of the day. With such relatively little growth to actually allocate, the question then is, what do we currently know about the development interests, and who has really made the investment in doing the background work, doing all the research, providing up-to-date materials to the municipality as part of a full application, and what's the status of that? And again, as I mentioned earlier, that is the differentiating factor between the Black Bear interests and Tor Construction at this particular point in time. And so that's the other piece that I wanted to emphasize, is in the report, the identification of this location, the Tor Construction location, is noted as a preliminary preferred option, and that's intentional. And that's because as we move beyond the growth management strategy, there's a subsequent planning process in Ontario to come through official plan amendments, whether by update of the city's official plan through staff leadership or applications being made by other interests. And it's through that official plan amendment process that there's room to consider other options. So we're not closing the door on opportunities to develop elsewhere in Fenelon Falls. We're simply saying, based on the cards that have been laid down on the table and the clarity that's been provided, we see an opportunity to identify growth going in this direction. However, if there's other interests and they bring forward applications, like any other application in Ontario at a municipality, it will be duly considered. And again, that's why it's cast as a preliminary preferred option right now, because it's really the official plan amendment process. That's the process that we ultimately use to then ultimately move the boundary, designate the land, and then facilitate future development. And there's still an opportunity for Black Bear and anyone else in Fenelon Falls, for that matter, because that's how planning works in Ontario.
Thanks very much. And so just so to be clear then, the differentiating factor here, why this property was, or this geographic location was selected as preferred and not, say, Black Bear or other interested landowners, was because the development interests were further along in their application. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Sorry. And we're actually encouraging Black Bear Estates, because I've actually, over the years, many years, have had conversations with Mr. Webster, and he's always expressed his intention to see some development. So I've encouraged Mr. Webster to conduct the rest of the technical work that's needed to bring forward an application, so it can be duly considered by the city. That's really how it works with everyone. The developer has to do their work and they have to make their application.
Thanks very much. Just two more very briefly, Mayor. To follow up on that, then, as you said, it was a, quote, preliminary preferred site. So in reading the growth management strategy, there seemed to be a lot of other factors that were considered. Those weren't necessarily taken into account. It was the development interest and the status of the progress of the application that made this site preferred. I'm just curious, was there a process by which other interested landowners or other locations geographically went through, a scorecarding process, or, those criteria were reviewed that are mentioned in the growth management strategy itself?
I think you may get your
Yes,
answer.
absolutely.
I think you may get your answer when Ms. Barry does her overview of the report.
Thank you, Mayor. Moving on then, you mentioned as well in your report that one of the goals is to make sure communities are complete and balanced. So in addition to the factors that included applications that being most advanced, was there a factoring in on your end about the need for development elsewhere in the Fenelon Falls urban boundary, say on the other side of the bridge, for example, to make that complete and balanced? Was that taken into account?
As I said, there are opportunities for development in Fenelon. Ultimately, the overall growth of any community is based on a partnership between the municipality and the individual development interests. So I've said this to many municipalities. We can identify where growth is going to go, but if the person that happens to own the land is not interested in developing, then it's kind of a fool's endeavor to identify growth going in that direction. And so what we attempt to do in planning across Ontario and on a community by community basis is have a dialogue in regards to where the municipality would like to direct growth and where we have development interests that have expressed an interest in developing. Because ultimately what has to happen is municipalities have to constantly upgrade and invest in infrastructure, and that's very expensive for municipalities to do. And we want to know that there's a development interest that is very interesting in developing in the community that's going to advance their development, pull building permits, and pay the development charges that the municipality needs to recover the cost of infrastructure. And so that's why there's this relationship between identifying where growth is going to go, understanding in circumstances where we are facing constraints like provincially significant wetlands, issues as it relates to geological conditions, or encroachment on prime agricultural lands, which are kind of in many cases non-starters for the direction that growth is going to go. In circumstances where we aren't constrained by some of these key provincial interest matters, then in many cases, it's a collaboration between the municipality and the development interests, trying to make sure that growth will march on in a logical, coordinated fashion.
Thanks very much. And that just kind of leads me to my third and final question. Thank you for indulgence, Mayor. Just with that as well, I know there are many interested landowners who've expressed interest in development throughout Fenelon Falls urban area, which would be, to me, a factor in obtaining the goal of complete and balanced geographical growth for Fenelon Falls. I'm not sure if those were considered or not in this calculation, and I guess we'll wait to hear from Director Barry this afternoon. My last question has to do with, I think, is an important point by Mr. Webster today. This report, obviously, will go forward and help inform a very consultative official plan process. Though, in your opinion, how much influence do you think being included as a preferred site holds? How much persuasive value, how much say in kind of becoming the default position is involved in the report only having this one preferred site or potential preferred site?
I just wanted to confirm the question was for me to answer. I am happy to answer it. It wasn't directed at.
Yeah, I think we're talking about Fenelon Falls, so yes.
Yeah, again, it was intentional to call it a preliminary preferred site because we do know that there are other interests in the community. Black Bear, for example, has been mentioned numerous times. And we know that once this growth management strategy comes to its conclusion, there's more time to come as it relates to the official plan amendment process. And as a result of there being more time to come for an official plan amendment process, it doesn't mean that the door is closed to anybody else, and it doesn't necessarily give any greater weight to the TOR construction at this particular point in time. It's simply understood that in regards to the various development interests on the edges of the Fenelon Falls urban boundary, we have one development that is deemed complete and currently in the process of full staff review. And that actually it makes it real, simply put as that. And if other things come forward and become real, they will be considered. That's how things happen in Ontario and in every community. So yeah, just to recap again, the star on the page in the GMS doesn't ascribe any greater degree of priority. And that's again why we chose our words carefully. It's a preliminary preferred option, knowing that there may be other options that come forward through the planning process that we have in Ontario.
Thank you very much for that answer, and especially because there's like a star on that particular spot. My concern is that, therefore, it could be looked at as, being preferential to other possible balanced locations for urban expansion in Fenelon, because it's, in the GMS report. So I really appreciate your words and explanations today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. So I guess what you're trying to say is the process is very fluid from some of the answers that you have given it. Just because it's got a star doesn't mean that that's where it's going to be. I guess that's a comment. Is that correct?
Yes, simply because there's a star doesn't guarantee
Yes.
that that's where development is going to go, and it doesn't negate any other development interest from bringing an application forward. The star simply illustrates where we understand things to be as of right now. Depending on how any application comes forward and gets reviewed, and if it's a subdivision establishes a draft approval status, it's at that point, that's really the key milestone in the overall picture of development in a community. It's when a subdivision achieves draft approval status with the municipality. It's at that point that the municipality has said, yes, we believe that the scale of the development is appropriate, and the subdivision fits with the community, it meets our planning principles. And at that point as well, servicing is allocated to the subdivision. And that means that, yes, if you've come forward and you're proposing X number of units, then we expect you to build that out and plug into our servicing. And so now we're going to make sure that our servicing system has capacity for you. That's the key. And as another development comes forward, going to go through the process, subdivision approval, gets a draft plan. Do we have service allocation? Yes, we do. So that's it's always staged step by step with the developers having to make their application and go through the process. Process does what it needs to do.
Just a couple quick questions. You talked about the rural settlements. So they're basically off the table because we really don't have good services. Is that correct?
Maybe I'll let Jamie answer that one, and then if you'd like me to kind of color around the edges, I'm happy to do that.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for through the mayor. So yes, so as part of, as I mentioned, as part of this work, we're doing a citywide analysis, but the primary focus of the land needs assessment is to identify and quantify the land requirements in the urban settlement areas, and that's really for a couple of reasons. One, traditionally we had technical guiding documents that specifically spelled out how we were to do that. That ultimately was all removed through the update of the provincial planning statement and through the last update in October. But there are some there's still a broad policy framework for how we conduct long-term growth analysis studies and land needs assessments. And ultimately, as a starting point, the province is directing that there's a hierarchy for development within Ontario, and fully serviced urban settlement areas are the priority for growth within Ontario. But the province does identify that growth should be directed to settlement areas, and rural settlement areas are also identified within that definition intentionally by the province as a part of the urban structure and part of the hierarchy, and they are identified as a settlement area. So we are acknowledging that the priority is urban settlement areas, but there's still a focus to identify growth in rural areas. But within rural areas, rural settlement areas are the priority. And the way we're looking at this from a technical standpoint to start is that these rural settlement areas are they're very important to the city. We know there's I think there's about 40 rural settlement areas throughout the city. They are important to the overall economic and community fabric of the city, and we want those areas to be vibrant. We want them to be sustainable, and we don't want to unduly constrain them. But we also recognize that there's only so much growth those areas can accommodate because due to the lack of services. So the province again identifies a process to go through and to review applications for development in rural areas. The local official plan also has supporting policies as well. And so we also acknowledge that trying to do anything right now to allocate 10% of the growth throughout those rural settlement areas through a technical process is probably not a very good place to put in effort, because it's very challenging to have precision in terms of where we're going to see that 10% growth in the rural settlement areas. And we don't necessarily want, just like we're doing now with this signaling of growth in the settlement areas and starring, areas, we don't necessarily want to start distracting everybody by trying to quantify and signal where or where not growth could occur in rural settlement areas. So as developments applications come forward over time, over the next 5 to 10 and long term, those applications are going to be reviewed, and they're going to be reviewed within the framework of the provincial legislation and framework and the local framework. And we want to ensure that we don't unduly constrain development, but there's a clear set of factors and requirements that the province and the city's asking for with respect to showing how how do you impact, what are the needs for services, how do you impact specialty crop lands, ultimately, I think a very key factor is growth assimilation. Like, how does development in the rural settlement areas, how is it assimilated, and what are the impacts of that? Specifically, if there's a large development, I think those things we know those issues need to be considered closely. But at this time, we're not specifically identifying any adjustments to rural settlement area boundaries as we are in the urban settlement area. One, because it's not required, and two, because we don't think it's
That's
necessary.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to be clear on that. We have
Okay.
many rural settlement areas that some of them are on services, which is interesting. So anyway, and one final question. I'm thinking of Bob Cajun specifically. We have an employment land. So our employment lands just designated for Lindsay or other like Fenlon or Omimi or Bob Cajun. I think we have one of the largest dairies in the province in Bob Cajun. So I just wondered if we have some employment lands that are designated.
Yeah, through the mayor, yes, there are employment lands designated in Fenelon Falls and Bob Cajun. We have undertaken a comprehensive look at that inventory of land and the demand for industrial development within both Bob Cajun and Fenelon Falls, as well as in Omimi. And what we've identified is that it's fairly tight with respect to the supply of land and the demand. That we're not looking to experience large surpluses of employment areas within Fenelon Falls and Bob Cajun over the long term, but we're not at this time suggesting expanding boundaries to accommodate expansions for additional urban employment lands in Fenelon Falls or Bob Cajun. But again, we have stressed in the report the need to have regular monitoring of that, and ultimately. It's important to recognize that this comprehensive review, or now what we're calling a growth management strategy, it's setting the framework for and the trajectory for growth over the next 3 decades. But it's going to be opened up several times, within that 30-year horizon. So at some point, I would imagine probably through the next growth management strategy, we might start to see some shortfalls maybe emerge at that point, but there does not appear to be any urgency, in our opinion, right now to expand boundaries.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Seeing nothing more, we have a mover and seconder. All in favor of receiving the presentation? And that passes. Thank you all for coming today, for being online, and for your presentation. We'll now move on to the growth management strategy, the report. And Councillor Richardson, I believe you would like to kick it off.
I would. Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity being the council rep on this task force. It's definitely was a very technical exercise, but it was a very thorough exercise, and I certainly want to express my thanks to our task force, to our consultants, to our staff, to our public stakeholders, and also to council as well, with the thoughtful dialogue and questions that we've had over numerous meetings. The end game definitely identifies the surpluses and our deficits when it comes to our main lands in our rural area and our urban areas right now. It's fleshed out the density intensification targets and suggests where expansions could occur based on considerations, and clearly has identified our employment growth for our city of Kawartha Lakes. This land budgeting exercise has demonstrated critical links between population projections and the amount of land designated in development. Our stakeholders have been carefully considered, and there are measurements in place to monitor and the pace of the guide if we need to change. It's a moving guide. I don't want to be too technical with my observations, but this has definitely been an exercise where I've really jumped in and tried to understand, and it has really resonated for me. And, it's providing us with up-to-date information about current and forecast growth levels for planning and for budgeting purposes. Folks, we have, 3 decades of growth here that we're looking at, and we have to be very prudent when we start looking at what infrastructure we need to put in place and how we're going to coordinate this growth. I think this GMS 2025 report just gives us the information that we need for the next 3 decades, and it gets us to that 51 benchmark. But saying all that, the task force has endorsed this new GMS, and by us supporting the GMS through council, we're not approving or supporting specific urban settlement boundary expansion areas, but we're looking at timing, right? This gives staff, this gives council the tools to move forward. It lets us move to the next phase, which is our OP review that we need to move into. It lets us look at all the other growth strategies that we need to look at through the city lens, which we will be having updates in later in the meeting today as well. So it aligns. Personally sitting through all these meetings, coming to council, I feel very confident where this report lands. And I know there's been a ton of effort and commitment on all aspects, and I just wanted to give my 2 cents before we moved in, and over to you, Director Barry, so thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Director Barry to do the heavy lifting here.
I'm not sure about that. I was just going to say ditto to the councillor's remarks. You're spot on, councillor, and thank you for those comments. I do have some remarks of my own that I will sort of summarize our staff report. I am very aware of the fact that it is now me keeping this group from, including our friends in the gallery, from lunch. So bear with me. I will be as succinct as I can. This has been a tremendously informative and great discussion this morning, actually, and I do thank all the participants. Flowing from the presentation that was just delivered from our consulting team, I'm, as I say, just going to go through some of the highlights of our staff report, Plan 2025-012, which brings forward the completed growth management strategy that we have been both listening to and have seen as an appendix to the staff report. This is a real milestone for the city. It is the first major step towards comprehensive present-day growth planning as we know it across Ontario. The GMS has been a critical input to the infrastructure master plans that our colleagues from engineering and corporate assets will elaborate on at this point later this afternoon. The city's first GMS in 2010, it was prepared under a different legislative framework and a host of different requirements. I will break that down a little further, but I'll hit a few staff report highlights first. We have been working with the team at Watson and Dillon for nearly 4 years. We have successfully navigated some significant disruptions through changes to provincial policies, as well as the issuance of minister's zoning orders that reset our project schedule overall. We are very encouraged by the technical analysis and the policy recommendations in the GMS and can confidently move forward using this blueprint, if I can put it that way, as an input, a guiding document for our official plan review. That is our next major and very exciting undertaking. So more on that in a moment. There were many informing inputs into the GMS. Hundreds of mapping and data files covering historic development activity in the city, ever-evolving provincial policy and legislation, our official plan appeals, and the subsequent resolution of those appeals. The structural components of both the urban and the rural land systems, our global, regional, and local economic trends that impact the city. Of course, our demographic profile, housing and employment trends, our population and employment forecast over the next 25 years, which gets us to about 2051. Housing supply and housing demand factors are, of course, integral inputs into this work. And finally, the comprehensive consultation with a council-appointed task force, the broader public, staff, our external agency partners, and with council. We have used social media, a project webpage, surveys, as well as in-person engagement over the last few years. The staff report details our consultation activities and annotates the 11 task force meetings, more than 10 touch points with city staff groups and external agencies, very good collaboration and coordination with our colleagues in engineering and corporate assets. Really, this is a must given the intersection of our master plans and our presentations to council, this being the fourth and our final opportunity to receive public deputations. All of these informing inputs essentially create two primary outputs of the GMS. The land budget is one, and the strategic policy recommendations are the other. Jamie has highlighted the policy recommendations for community areas, which cover urban as well as rural lands, recommendations for employment lands. He also indicated that the phasing plan is a guide, and it is a guide only, sure. It's named a phasing plan in the strategy, but let's stay mindful of the fact that this really has been developed to be nimble, to be responsive to market changes, and how quickly or otherwise developments are progressing. It really is written with that spirit, and my read of it in the GMS makes that clear. Rory has described the province's lands need assessment exercise that resulted in this land budget. Thank you, Councillor, for articulating it that way. The land budget characterizes our land needs to 2051, and that's a key takeaway for Council. First, that we have an oversupply of urban land in Lindsay and Omemee, and second, that we have an undersupply for the urban land in Bobcaygeon and Fenelon Falls. So an oversupply means we can accommodate the projected growth to 51 in Omemee without expanding the current urban boundary. In Lindsay, the urban boundary needn't be expanded beyond those lands subject to the MZOs for community uses. We have seen some necessary expansion opportunities for employment lands in Lindsay. So that's been articulated. The undersupply in Bobcaygeon means we need to expand the boundary by about 23 hectares and by about 38 in Fenelon Falls to accommodate the projected growth to 2051. Rory took us through some mapping, which reflects very preliminary options for possible development potential that we can consider through the official plan review and from further discussion with landowners who are interested in seeing development on their property. In Lindsay's case, the province requires that the MZO lands be accommodated at the time of the next official plan update and related infrastructure plans. A developer could also initiate an independent official plan amendment through filing an application with the city to incorporate the MZO lands within the urban area. We've heard our consultant Roy speak to that point as well. For other areas, more generally, we know good planning dictates a handful of core principles when considering conversions to urban land. Considerations like, does the land abut an existing urban serviced area? Is it in proximity to service? And what are the implications of extending services to that new land? Are there any constraints to development at all? Are there any impacts that can't be overcome to the agricultural system? Of course, is it a logical extension to the community, and what development activity has already been undertaken? Considerations like these feed a land allocation exercise. The GMS isn't a land allocation exercise. The GMS is a land budget exercise, looking at the city's growth potential as a whole. And those are those buckets of acreage that we've heard and seen on the slideshow this morning. That said, some preliminary findings taking these core principles into account helps inform the scenario modeling component of our companion infrastructure master plans. The GMS and our infrastructure master plans inform the official plan review. They'll also guide future decision-making on developer-initiated development applications that are subject to consultation and that underpin fiscally responsible decision-making by council. I did mention the city's 2010 GMS, which contained population and employment forecast to 2031, which was the previous planning horizon. That strategy was prepared under the original growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe in 2006, okay, over 20 years ago, just about. The planning era of that day was one where municipal councils were required to specifically allocate housing and plan to maximum Targets. Anyone familiar with the 2010 GMS likely has a visual of maps with individual parcels of land containing a specific number of dwelling units per parcel. Today, and quite recently, actually only since the changes to the PPS in 2024, late last year, are we now required to operate in reverse. We plan to minimum targets and across the whole planning area. For those involved in this industry for the past 2 decades, developers, practitioners, decision makers, this is a major shift in how we approach growth planning. And it can be challenging to adjust our mindsets to this new approach around the concept of land budgeting as opposed to these specific allocations. And that's precisely why we've been deliberate with identifying the total land budget in the 2025 GMS and not seeing those specific unit counts on specific parcels. So today we aren't asking council to determine how a new urban boundary should be shaped. That requires detailed land use evaluation, which takes place through either our official plan review or through a developer-initiated official plan amendment application for a site-specific development proposal. Those applications get submitted to us with an exhaustive list of supporting studies that examine impacts to the environment, traffic, archaeology, servicing, stormwater, agriculture, recreational spaces, the list goes on. And that is where council makes decisions on the compatibility of that development proposal in alignment with our land use planning framework, our official plan, and the other provincial policies. Today, we are asking council to endorse the land budget. That is uncontested. We haven't heard any concerns about not enough land in the land budget, and that is central to the GMS. The GMS isn't a statutory document like other planning instruments you're familiar with. Council's decision to endorse the GMS can't be appealed. While the province no longer requires municipalities to undertake these municipal comprehensive reviews that incorporate land needs assessments, having a detailed growth management strategy ensures that the city is planning for an appropriate amount of land to be made available overall in order to accommodate the residential and employment growth forecast that we know and in a cost-effective way. The GMS is here to look at the big picture and further guides capital infrastructure planning, investment, and is in alignment with our companion infrastructure plans. Those are the Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan and the Transportation Master Plan. Again, that we will hear through Director Rojas a little later today. I will wrap up my comments, of course, by thanking our policy shop and administrative staff involved with the project, with preparing our staff report, the entire project team, our task force, first chaired by David Webb, then by Chris Appleton, of course, our task force council rep, Councillor Richardson, thank you. At their January 9th meeting, our GMS task force approved the final draft of the growth management strategy through resolution GMS 2025.066, and through that action encourages council to endorse the GMS. And with that, and in accordance with the task force terms of reference, the task force has successfully completed its work and will now be dissolved. And so, Mr. Mayor, we have duly considered and addressed the deputants' comments through the GMS with an appropriate amount of flexibility to continue working with the landowners through the GMS and beyond into the forthcoming official plan program. We recommend that council move our staff report recommendations today and endorse the growth management strategy with the updated population and employment forecasts for the city to 2051. Mr. Mayor, thank you. Those are my submissions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions for the director on the report? Would somebody like to make a motion that The report Growth Management Strategy 2025 be received, that the Growth Management Strategy 2025 substantially in the form attached as Appendix A to Report Plan 2025-012 be endorsed as input into the city's official plan review and updated population and employment forecasts for the City of Kawartha Lakes to 2051, and that this recommendation be brought forward to Council for consideration at the next regular Council meeting. Councillor Richardson, Deputy Mayor McDonald. Again, any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you very much. We now have a decision to make. Well, let's do item 5, water and wastewater servicing and capacity master plan study. There are no deputations regarding the water and wastewater servicing. And as far as I know, there's no correspondence regarding the water and wastewater. Is that correct? Mr. Purdy is here. How long is your presentation, Mr. Purdy?
I've got questions.
5-10 minutes? Would you like to go forward with your presentation? And, we may break for lunch and consider the report after we do the starter company. Okay? Councillor Perry.
Please excuse me for one moment, Mayor. I'll be right back. Thank you.
You're coming down to this podium? Yeah, thanks. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this brief. Good afternoon. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to inform Council that the Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan study is now complete and the final project file report is ready for Council endorsement. In the summer of 2022, Council awarded a contract to TY Lin International Canada Incorporated to undertake this study in compliance with the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Planning and Design process. I gratefully acknowledge the efforts and hard work from TY Lin, the City Project Lead, Nafir Rahman, and also support from the Director of Engineering and Corporate Assets, Juan Rojas. I would also like to acknowledge assistance and input from the Planning Department, Development Engineering, Public Works, Water and Wastewater, and Aqua operational staff. Abe Kademi, Project Manager from TY Lin, has joined us virtually and is also available to answer questions Council may have today. At the Council meeting of December 10th, 2024, TY Lin presented an update on the study findings. Now I'll walk you through the staff report ENG 2025-002, titled 2025 Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study Completion, which outlines the overall study findings and provides a guide to the city in planning for infrastructure and financial requirements to support growth. The city provides municipal water servicing to 21 communities and wastewater servicing to 6 communities. The city is obligated to implement and maintain servicing and provide planning to support appropriate growth and development in the city that is affordable and sustainable. In 2012, a municipal servicing assessment was completed by UEM, and in 2014, WSP completed a detailed capacity assessment for Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, and Fenelon Falls. Since this time, provincial growth legislation changed several times, and the city has been experiencing a significant increase in growth over recent years, which is driving demands for improvements and upgrades to the water and wastewater infrastructure. A Class EA master plan is a long-range plan that ties together the various needs of an overall system within a broader context, and typically includes a set of separate projects that are to be individually implemented. Based on planning forecasts from the 2025 GMS, the city is expected to grow to a population of approximately 130,000 people and 40,600 jobs by the year 2051. This master plan Class EA process includes an assessment of the problem and opportunities, an evaluation of alternative solutions, an assessment of potential effects on the environment, as well as public and review agency consultation. Various master planning level alternative solutions were developed to determine how the city's water and wastewater infrastructure will support growth while also preserving the level of service to the existing residents and businesses. Each of the alternatives was evaluated comparatively and qualitatively and scored based on its impact relative to the other alternatives. The preferred solution was determined based on engineering requirements, environmental considerations such as natural, social, economic, public input, and information gathered during the studies. The servicing study began by reviewing all available background information, which included previous servicing assessment studies. The team also reviewed historical water demand and wastewater flow data, growth master plans, existing modeling information, various engineering reports, regulatory permits and approvals, and meeting with facility operators. A desktop level assessment was conducted to assess the capacity deficiencies within the existing water and wastewater systems, as well as identify upgrades required to accommodate the forecasted growth. Additionally, field data was collected from flow monitoring of the sanitary collection systems. Fire hydrants tests of water distribution systems were completed in areas where low pressures are expected as a result of population growth. Field investigation was focused on collecting information for 3 major urban communities, Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, and Fenelon Falls. Field data was analyzed to calibrate and validate the existing water and wastewater system network models. The models are dynamic and can be updated to evaluate system needs and development impacts. During the study, a number of stakeholders, including regulatory agencies, developers, consultants, Indigenous communities and organizations, and other interested parties were consulted to provide their input. Staff hosted 2 public information events. The first PIC was held in Lindsay on October the 18th, 2023, where a presentation was live broadcasted with remote participation. As part of the second round of public consultation, staff hosted 2 PIC events. A PIC was held in Fenelon Falls on June 19th, 2024, and the next day in Lindsay on June 20th, 2024. The basis for all master planning activities is primarily the growth forecast for the municipality. The growth information from cities' previous and new GMS studies, as well as all active and potential development interests and applications, were considered to determine the ultimate forecasted growth on a community-wide basis. Using the growth forecast, the city's engineering design standards, water demand, and wastewater flow projections were developed. Table 1 of the staff report shows a summary of rated capacity, current and future water demand and wastewater flow projections for water and wastewater facilities in the 5 major communities. These projections form the basis to determine future infrastructure requirements for the planning horizon of 2051. Table 2 of the staff report outlines short-term by 2031, medium-term by 2041, and long-term by 2051, individual linear and vertical water infrastructure upgrade needs and cost estimates in 2025 dollars to accommodate the projected future growth in major urban areas. Similarly, Table 3 outlines community-wide wastewater infrastructure upgrade needs and cost estimates. Cost estimates were developed using recent unit rates. Estimates include material costs, excavation, restoration, etc., as well as a 10% engineering fee and a 25% contingency. Based on the study findings, it identified that major facility upgrades or expansion would be required in all 3 major communities, Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, and Fenland Falls, to accommodate the growth to 2051. This includes facilities such as water treatment plants, water storage, water pollution control plants, and sewage pumping stations. Table 4 and 5 provide the summary of capital cost forecast in 2025 dollars by community for proposed water and wastewater infrastructure upgrade needs respectively. Based on the summary, the capital cost forecast over the next 25 years is about $1 billion. This study will assist the city in planning a long-term strategy for infrastructure and financial requirements, including development charges and wastewater rate studies. Projects or initiatives identified in the master plan document will still be subject to the annual budget process. This servicing master plan supports the city's strategic priorities of good government and healthy environment by planning for and providing critical assets and infrastructure in a sustainable manner, and continue to protect our environment. Water and wastewater infrastructure is critical in supporting a vibrant and growing economy. This is a dynamic and living document which will be continuously reviewed and updated as growth occurs and changes. At this time, staff recommends that report ENG 2025-002, 2025 Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study completion be received, and that the 2025 Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study completion in the form attached as Appendix A to the report ENG 2025-002 be endorsed by Council as the City of Kawartha Lake's long-term servicing strategy and policy direction, and that staff be authorized to publish the notice of completion of the municipal class environmental assessment planning and design process for the water and wastewater servicing and capacity master plan study, and file the Class EA project file report for the legislated 30-day comment period, and that this recommendation be brought forward to Council for consideration at the next regular Council meeting. The Class EA project file report is available on the city website. A hard copy report will be available at the clerk's office and the Lindsay Library for public viewing prior to the legislated 30-day comment period. Thank you. And we'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you. I think we'll deal with your presentation first. Director Rojas, did you have something?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank Manager Purdy for a great presentation. Sort of my comments are going to be aligned both with the Water Wastewater Master Plan and the Transportation Master Plan, because they're generic in nature. So both projects or both master plans follow the municipal class EA process. A little bit different than the GMS or the growth management strategy. The master plans are prescribed in the municipal class EA. So you're going to hear a lot about endorsement, notice of project completion, and then a public review process. All that is part of the municipal class process for master plans. These speaking notes that Mr. Purdy has done and Mr. Farquhar will do for the TMP can be made available to the clerk as part of the minutes. So we will be making those available, the speaking notes, to the clerk after this meeting. They're supposed to supplement the engineer's report that you see in front of you that we'll be discussing soon. Upon completion of this, of both master plans, we will then provide alignment with various financial plans, asset management plans, expansionary plans, and so forth. So both these master plans are framework agreements. They're dynamic. They will be reviewed and updated on an annual basis and would feed other corporate initiatives or objectives.
Thank you. I need a motion to receive the presentation from Mr. Purdy. Councillor Richardson, Councillor Warren. Questions, Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, and through you, Ms. Mayor. Wow, when you say $1 billion, it just shows you how we're not small. We're pretty large, and that's an impact. When I was reading it, I was like, I had to read it twice, but that's just a comment. Maybe just if I can just have you comment on the fact how critical, recognizing that this is a living document, how critical is that we don't delay and that we need to move forward with this.
Mr. Purdy or Director?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So some of these projects have already started. Again, we have different time frames, short, medium, long, similar to the GMS. And there's a lot of legwork that goes into expansion of water and wastewater infrastructure. So again, this is a master plan that yields specific projects. Those specific projects are going to have its own process, its own public consultation, its own options on how to implement those recommendations. So yes, it is critical to start, but it's also critical not to overcommit, because it is tied with development, and it's tied to, a lot of these projects are tied to our development charges, which have to be updated. So yes, the $1 billion is a large number. A large portion of that is development charge funded, in addition to other grants that may become available by the province or the feds. So yes, it is critical to get going in a controlled, sustained manner.
Thank you very much, and that was just kind of the messaging I was looking for, and also that link to our, update in our DC charges too when it comes to those, growth playing for growth. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry?
Just very briefly, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I know this is long-awaited information with timelines and dollar values, albeit somewhat perhaps overwhelming dollar values. Just wondering for Fenelon Falls, targeted upgrades have a timeline of 2031. I'm just wondering, is that when all of these would be undertaken or planned to be undertaken, or as Director Rojas just mentioned, are some preliminarily underway? Will some be put over? Kind of are there some that may be no sooner than 2031? That kind of thing, because that's a lot for 1 year. And if you just break that down, that would be very helpful for my constituents and I.
Yes, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. If you turn to page 13 of the report, there is a breakdown based on Fenelon Falls 2031 upgrades, 2041 upgrades, and 2051 upgrades. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yep, thanks for that. I see that here in the chart. I guess my question was more specifically, those are all that are planned for the year that they are assigned. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So those are anticipated based on the growth forecast. It is dynamic, and it does have the ability to change. And like I said earlier, it will be brought forward to the annual budget process for approval, each individual project.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Warren?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I may have missed this, but it looked like in Bob Cajun it was a lot of pipes in the ground and that sort of thing. Is there a plan to replace the wastewater treatment plant? I may have missed that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe I'll pass this one to Abe from TY Lin.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Corby. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Plan to replace the wastewater treatment plant, and I apologize as I'm just refreshing my memory. In Bob Cajun. We did identify improvements, and specifically for Bob Cajun, sorry, I'm just going through the list here. There is an expansion of the water treatment plant contemplated to align with growth. And
I didn't see it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, sorry, it's on page, and there's a wastewater treatment plant upgrade recommended as well.
And what year is that? Sorry.
These are very specific questions.
If maybe I
I
could
think those were
jump in.
2031. Sure, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, if I could maybe jump in to try to clarify. To the counselor, if you look at page 12 of 16 under Bob Cajun, 2031 upgrades, the second line is for the water pollution control plant, treatment capacity increase, so expand it. So what that means is prior to 2031, Bob Cajun water pollution control plant would need to expand to accommodate the growth forecasted to 2031.
So just through you, just expansion, not replace. It's fairly old. So that's what I was getting at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a mover and seconder to receive the presentation. We'll deal with the report subsequently. All in favor? And that's passed. We're going to break now for lunch until 1 o'clock. When we come back, we will do the starter company, and then we will do the report for water and wastewater, and then Mr. Farquhar will do yours. I apologize. Things went longer with the GMS than we had anticipated. Thank you for your indulgence. So we'll take a break now till 1 o'clock. Thanks. I'll call the meeting back to order. And just a reminder that this is a committee of the whole meeting and no decisions will be made here today. There will only be recommendations, so we'll go to our next regular council meeting on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 for consideration. A couple of reminders for today's meeting. Members of the media may sit in the upper balcony at the reserved media table. All other guests, please take a seat in the first floor gallery. If that is full, there is overflow seating on the second floor in the Victoria Room, where you will be able to see and hear the meeting. We live stream the meeting on your YouTube channel, and the recording is available after the meeting. The meeting is also broadcast Live on your TV. Cogeco subscribers channel 10, HD channel 700, and rebroadcasted on Wednesday at 9 a.m. on Saturday at noon. Because meetings are accessible to the public in all these ways, video or audio recording by members of the public is not permitted in council chambers. This is to ensure that all attendees and those who come to make a deputation feel at ease. Thank you for your cooperation. So we're going to have a mixed up day here. Let's see. Manager Rebecca Mustard, are you all set to go with Starter Company? Okay. If you'd like to bring the folks down, and we'll do the presentations. Just a note, Diane Stevens, who ran this program for many, many years, and I'm sure these folks here benefited from her, and unfortunately for us, managers, Ms. Stevens decided to retire and move on with another phase in her life, but we certainly thank her for many years of service and for all of the things she did to keep Starter Company up and running and being the success it is. So I certainly wanted to mention her before we got going today, and now I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So today, thank you for having us here. The Small Business Centre is part of our economic development program here at the city. And today I've got Sandy Greenberg, who is a facilitator of this program and summer company for those of you who have youth in your lives that want to run their own business over the summer. Sandy also facilitates that program. So we're going to announce the graduates of the program this year. And before we get that, and while Sandy's coming up, thank you very much, Mayor Elmsley, for mentioning Diane's wonderful contribution to this community over 20 years of leading the Small Business Centre. I'm really thrilled that we actually now have Christine McLean, who has joined the team in that position and will be, who's here in the audience with us today, and she will be working with Sandy and leading the centre into the future, which is wonderful. So with that, I will pass it over to Sandy and the wonderful participants that we've got here today.
Hi, everyone. As Rebecca said, my name is Sandy Greenberg, and I am the Economic Development Officer for the Small Business Programs. So we're here today. The Kawartha Lakes and the Small Business Centre are proud to announce the 2024 graduates of the Kawartha Lakes Starter Company Plus program. Over the past 12 months, we've had 15 businesses that have taken this part in this program, and we continue to work with them as they grow. For those of you who are not familiar with the program, the Starter Company Plus program is an initiative in partnership with the province of Ontario, and it's aimed at fostering economic development, job creation in Kawartha Lakes. So a little bit about the program. What's involved is mentorship and coaching, business workshops, financial support in the way of a grant of up to $5,000, as well as wonderful networking and community opportunities. So we offer 2 cohorts a year, and we work closely with the entrepreneurs for a 10-month period. This marks an important milestone for these local entrepreneurs who have worked diligently to grow their businesses with the support of the Start a Company Plus program. And we will be recognizing these participants today by giving them a certificate of completion. So we also will continue to celebrate them on March the 1st. We'll be having a showcase at the Lindsay Square Mall where they will each have a table and a booth, and they will get some wonderful exposure to the community for their businesses. So I would like to actually ask the mayor if he would help me give out the certificates, and then we can help celebrate the participants that are in attendance here today. So, hi.
Hi. Again.
Which side would you like to?
I don't have a good side.
You don't have a, neither do I, so it's okay. So the first person we're doing is Ken Shaw.
Come on down. It's just like The Price is Right, you know?
Next contestant.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And if you can just say the name of your business would be wonderful.
It's Cherry Stone Landscaping and Construction, Inc.
Good.
Beautiful. Thank
Why
you
don't
so
come
much.
Stand
Stand
Okay.
there.
Be the rose between two thorns or something.
Oh, picture.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
There we go.
Get that. Actually, Ken, if we can get you way back there, and
You
then we'll do
want
a
us
group
to-
shot afterwards.
Okay.
We can do that after.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you just hang out over, if that's
We just
okay.
want to
Yeah.
hang out here.
Yeah.
Nice to the mayor. Sure.
I'm going to need him to give out the rest of those.
I've been married a long time. I know how to take orders.
Wonderful. Okay. Next person is Bill Kavanagh. Yay.
Here you go, Bill.
Thank you.
And your business?
Cherry Stone Landscaping and Construction. It's a partnership.
He's the other part, the other half. Okay. Next is Kyla Vitek.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm Kyla Vitek Jewelry.
Beautiful.
Come.
And we're going to wait. Jamie? Yeah? We'll just wait for the mayor. Come on down.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Of Saturday Scotch Designs.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie.
Is that Scotch the drink?
Jeremy, you want to go, right?
Sure.
Yeah. You're a good assistant.
I told you, I take orders well.
Our next is Jeremy Stewart.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jeremy Stewart, and I'm SCC Builds Construction.
Great. Thank you. And next is Samuel Jenkinson.
Sam Jenkinson, Custom Woodworking.
Next is Sean Touton.
Congratulations. My pleasure. Thank you. Come and get your.
Hi, my name is Sean Touton, and my company name is Woods Avenue Digital Media Production Incorporated.
Wonderful.
Graham Morrison.
My name is Graham Morrison, and my company is Morrison Music.
Okay. And next we have Paige Henkin, sorry. Hennikin, sorry. I got a little tongue-tied, Paige, I'm so sorry.
No, wonderful, wonderful, thank you. My name is Paige Leal, actor, public speaker, and autism advocate. Thanks so much.
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all for coming today, and congratulations to you on completing the program. Did you want to mention the names of the other folks who couldn't show up today?
If it's okay, in the interest of time, we have some wonderful participants. We've got a press release that will be coming out today, and we'll throw it all over social media, and we'll have every single participant's name, all of the graduates, and all of their contact information.
Okay, thanks very much. I have a motion that the presentation by Rebecca Mustard, Manager of Economic Development, and Sandy Greenberg, Economic Development Officer, Small Business Program regarding the Starter Company plus Entrepreneurship Program and the graduates of 2024 be received and the recommendation be brought forward to Council for consideration at the next regular Council meeting. Councillor Perry, Deputy Mayor McDonald, all in favor? And that passes. Thank you. We're going to bounce back in the agenda. The folks who are here for deputations, we just have to finish up one thing from this morning, if you don't mind. We'll go back to item 5.4 on the agenda, which is the Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study. And we need a motion that the report ENG 2025-002, 2025 Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study completion be received, that the 2025 Water and Wastewater Servicing and Capacity Master Plan Study completion in the form attached as Appendix A to the report ENG 2025-002 be endorsed by council as the City of Kawartha Lakes long-term servicing strategy and policy direction, and that staff be authorized to publish the notice of completion of the municipal class environmental assessment, Class EA, planning and design process for the water and wastewater servicing and capacity master plan study, and file the Class EA project file report for the legislated 30-day comment period, and that this recommendation be brought forward to council for consideration at the next regular council meeting. I have a mover and seconder. Councillor Richardson. Seconder, Councillor Joyce. Are there any comments or questions on the report? Seeing none, all in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Now we'll move on to deputations. Item 9 on the agenda is deputations, and item 9.1 is request for an award drain educational and identification program. Mr. James Blair. Sir, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Elected officials, members of council, and guests, thank you very much. My name is James Blair. Today I would like to put forth an idea, and just for consideration for the council to consider, an idea of an education and an identification program for award drains. In 2016, I took over a family farm, and they say, be careful what you wish for, and I understood what they meant. Running into some issues, and again, I have to commend the city staff here in this Kawartha Lakes. I've had great rapport with the drainage superintendents. They've helped me along the way. One of the things that I see that might be beneficial is by identifying award drains that are out there. Unfortunately, under the Ditches and Watercourses Act that is now repealed, they were supposed to be tied to a person's title. However, for some reason, they haven't. Recently, a property owner just north of us who is tied into one of the drains that I belong to, it's been 5 different properties have changed hands, and no one knew there was an award drain on that property. And that's no one's fault other than maybe a lack of follow-up on judicial following through the system. However, what I'm hoping to do with the information I presented to you, the city has all the deeds and records specific to the award drains. And I'm hoping that in the idea of saving costs, as a preventative measure instead of a reactive measure, that we can start looking at possible drains that are there, identify them, have the people understand the purpose of the drain with a bit of education, and hopefully work towards them so that we don't end up down the way to a municipal drain if we don't have to. And again, saving quite a few costs if possible. Now, I do realize there's pros and cons to it. I do believe, however, people being afforded the information will allow them to make a better choice ahead of time, maybe to work with neighbors instead of working against them, and then realizing they get a bill down the way of $20,000 to $200,000, which changes people's minds quite quickly. That's what I have to ask the council, and if that can be received, I'd be greatly appreciative of that.
Thank you. If you just stay there in case there are any questions. I got a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor Richardson, seconder. Councillor Yeo. Any comments or questions for the deputant? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. And as I noted at the beginning, there's no decisions made here. Your deputation will be forwarded to the next regular council meeting, which is February 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kawartha Water Fund Landowner Grant Program, Daniel Marco Hunter, specialist with Kawartha Conservation. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Thank you so much.
Whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Danielle Marcoux Hunter and I'm the landowner and community specialist with Kawartha Conservation. As a member of our stewardship team, I work with landowners, municipalities, and community groups to take on environmental projects that improve water quality across our watershed. Today, I'm happy to share a bit of a good news story for you about our Kawartha Water Fund program. The Water Fund is a landowner and community incentive program that we've been running across Kawartha Lake since 2019. Now, you do have some slides in front of you. I probably wouldn't worry about those until I get to slide 5, and I'll let you know. So we believe together that through the Water Fund program, we can achieve lake management plan recommendations across Kawartha Lakes by providing technical and financial support for private landowners. When considering how to make an impact across our watershed, we know most of it is held in private land, so it makes the most sense to offer tools and funding to do this. The Kawartha Water Fund is a grant program that we deliver on an annual basis, and we're now entering our 7th year. Each year, our program reach grows, we get more applications, and the competition gets more fierce, which is why we're so excited that this year we have our biggest grant budget yet, and we're excited to see just how many different proposals we can support throughout the year. So again, this funding is available for any landowner or community organization that operates in Kawartha Lakes. Funding is available up to 50% of the project cost for environmental projects for landowners. The cap there is $4,000. Community groups can receive up to 100% of their project costs. This is just variable depending on how much funding we have available and how much competition we have per year. So on slide number 5, I included some before and after photos. So you'll see a selection here that just demonstrate the diversity of eligible project types that we accept for funding. Here is a tree planting after a fire. We helped a landowner plant over 100 trees after they suffered a fire on their property near Little Silver Lake. We also support the protection and stabilization of waterfronts from erosion, ice heaving, and land loss through erosion control, stabilization measures, and planting. We protect the contamination of surface water and our groundwater systems by funding septic upgrades, well upgrades, and well decommissions. This photo here is an example of a contaminated pit well that was upgraded to a capped drilled well by a licensed well driller. On the farm, we also help to improve farm operations through the implementation of agricultural best management practices. Here are a few examples. A greenhouse rainwater recycling system that's really innovative to help prevent water loss and also water usage from our systems. And livestock exclusion fencing and alternate watering systems to help keep cattle out of water. Here you can see a cow using a nose pump, and it's been fenced off of the waterway that runs through the farm. In the city, we support urban projects like rain gardens that help to reduce stormwater runoff and flooding, protecting urban infrastructure like homes, roads, and our sewer systems. And finally, last but not least in these examples, I've included a community fund example, the Canopy Project. So we've helped support youth and community tree planting at public schools across Kawartha Lakes. A number of other environmental education initiatives and actions are eligible for community funding too. So in great news, since 2019, we've granted out over $213,000 to over 100 landowners in the city. The landowners have brought in an additional $786,000 to the table in the value of the projects they've completed. This means the return on our investment is over 269%. On the community front, we've seen over $82,000 granted to 18 community organizations over the past 6 years. This leverages an additional $209,000 in community investment for a 154% return on our investment. All this is to say that the 2025 Water Fund program is now accepting applications. It launched last week, and it's available at our website, kawarthaconservation.com/waterfund. We hope that you will share this important and great funding opportunity with your constituents, with your networks, and with community groups who are doing great environmental work in our city. I've also included my contact information here. I provide free phone and on-site consultations to support the decisions about project eligibility and for the full application process. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing what our community proposes this year through the Water Fund.
Thank you. Wow, you must have practiced because you're dead on the 5 minutes. So. Just stay there for a minute or two and see if there are any questions for you. Can I get a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Warren, Councillor Joyce. Any questions for the deputant or comments? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. And more of a comment, congratulations, well done. This definitely is a good news story for the whole state of Kawartha Lakes when you look at your return on investment and those connections you're making with landowners and in providing those environmental projects. So I think it's wonderful that you came today. We can help spread the word, and like you said, let's see where the intake goes this year. So well done.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Yeah, through you, ditto for sure. And I want to welcome you back, Danielle, and I really look forward to working with you and all these great projects. It's just incredible to, protect our water. And that's, from runoff in the urban and rural areas. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce, did you have some? You're good? Okay. No more questions or comments? All in favor? And that's passed. Moving on, we have item 9.3, which is a planning inquiry regarding 121 Autumn Lane in Kirkfield. Miss Yvonne Carroll and John Ray.
Okay. Thank you. I'd just like to point out that John Ray is ill today, so Peggy is here in his place. So in August of last year, my husband and I approached John and Peggy Ray about purchasing their farm property of 100 acres at 121 Autumn Lane in Kirkfield. This property has been in the Ray family for 150 years, and Mr. and Mrs. Ray have lived in their home farm for 21 years. The Rays informed us that they had listed the property in early 2022 in anticipation of retiring and using the proceeds for this purpose. They received an offer which included a condition for permits, and when inquiries were made with the city, they were informed that there would be no building or renovation permit ever issued on this unassumed road. The only approved use was that of a hunt camp, and so naturally the buyer withdrew their offer. You can imagine the Rays' surprise in hearing that they were living illegally and their disappointment to know that their retirement nest egg had disappeared overnight. My understanding with regard to an unassumed road is that the municipality absolves itself of liability in connection to these roads. Throughout the time the Rays lived on their farm, they maintained the road, including snow clearing, grading, and routine maintenance. They had no issues or concerns in accessing the property year-round, and neither did a very heavy propane delivery truck. Similar to the hundreds of private roads in Kawartha Lakes, where property owners are responsible for their maintenance, my husband and I are also willing and able to assume this task. With Mr. and Mrs. Ray's consent, I contacted Mr. Shahid at the Planning Department regarding this issue and was advised that the property was zoned agricultural and environmentally protected. Mr. and Mrs. Ray's tax bill has both farm taxable and residential taxable values listed. And also the 2023 impact notice summarizes the property as residential/land, portion farmed. Mr. Shahid added that planning staff were not able to support a rezoning. No reason was given, which evidently costs a minimum of $10,475. I could, however, complete a pre-consultation application for a fee of $750 in order to receive preliminary comments on the proposal. I wonder if anyone on council can appreciate that unless you have Flato or Bromont or Tribute attached to your application, these options are tremendously cost prohibitive. And I wonder, how do we ever arrive at affordable housing when it costs hundreds of dollars to have a conversation with our elected representatives? A quick drive through this municipality shows hundreds of acres of productive farmland being paved over as we speak for the purpose of building subdivisions. Data from the 2021 Census of Agriculture shows Ontario is losing 319 acres of farmland daily. And apparently there is a housing shortage. So in your own housing needs review, it states that the City of Kawartha Lakes and the County of Haliburton is experiencing a housing and houselessness crisis, with thousands waiting for community housing and the wait list for some exceeding 10 or more years. Yet the order is to bulldoze the Rays house down. In making this decision, is the council at all concerned that the province is expected to run out of waste disposal capacity by 2032? Fenelon Landfill which is ours, is already closed to the public until May 1st. There are so many threats to the viability of small family farms, including restrictive regulations, urban sprawl, and competition from giant factory farms. I don't think it's news that huge investors are driving small farmers off the land, and I hope Council doesn't follow suit. Who will be interested in buying this small farm when they're told they can never live on it? Not a small farmer. We're constantly told to buy local, support your local farmers market, and order directly from local farms. When our municipalities make unhelpful decisions, such as tear your house down and you will never be allowed to live on that farm again, these are meaningless platitudes. If small farms are worth preserving, then these words should mean something. If the property is zoned agricultural and environmentally protected, I see this, we both do, as very positive things, because as small farmers, we have a vested interest in protecting the natural resources and the environment. We want to preserve biodiversity, open space and trees, and reduce land degradation. We believe this as though our lives depend on it, because it does. I absolutely understand and agree there has to be rules, but shouldn't rules be logical? Shouldn't the rules that prohibit us or the Rays from actually living on this working farm make sense? As I noted in an earlier letter to the city, I understand that part of Council's mandate is to serve the public interest. And I have tried very, very hard to understand why allowing us to work and live on this farm is in any way contrary to the interests of the public. It is unclear to me how the City of Kawartha Lakes administration is in a better position to make decisions about how this land should be used and cared for than the farmers who have loved and tended this farm for generations. I think most people are familiar with the saying, you can't fight City Hall, which means nothing can be done to change the situation because it is a governmental decision. It means it's a thankless and futile task to take on the powerful. We're not interested in a fight or taking on the powerful. We just want to live out the rest of our lives in peace, farming and taking care of this little farm. Living quietly in a home that has served the Rays so well for all these years, paying our taxes, and doing our best to be good neighbors and law-abiding citizens. I believe that you all ran for office and are in your roles because you value the concerns of the citizens of Kawartha Lakes and you want to make good decisions. I sincerely hope that in considering this request, Council members won't just look at what bureaucratic boxes to tick, but actually look at the situation with imagination, vision, and wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just stay there for a couple of minutes in case there are questions. Let's get a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor Perry, Councillor Yeo, questions, Councillor Warren.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming. A question, how long has this farmhouse been on the land?
Defer to Peggy.
Since 1995.
So it hasn't, so you said generations, like that farm has been going for generations, but there hasn't been a building on it since just 1995. Okay, thank you very much.
There was an old farm building long ago.
Okay.
And it was taken down to build the new one, I assume?
No, I think it was just I think it was just old and.
Okay.
I don't know how long ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, what I will tell you is your deputation, Councillor Yeo, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question for the deputant. Staff, if I heard you right, staff said that it had to be bulldozed?
It had to be torn down, yeah. There's a tear down order, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think what will happen is this deputation gets forwarded to the council meeting on February the 18th.
So should I come back to that meeting
No,
then?
you don't have to come back. You can if you like. We love to have an audience, but it's not necessary. I will make sure it gets extracted. That means it'll get taken so that some action can be taken on your request, and we will look into it further and we will get back to you.
Okay, so would we expect some sort of answer by February 18th? Oh, sorry, would we expect some sort of answer by the 18th?
It would probably be after the 18th, because we will have to extract it, and then we will have to ask staff for some information on it and background and things like that. So it will take us a couple of weeks before we get back to you. Okay?
Thank you.
All in favor of the receiving the deputation? Thank you. And Councillor Yeo, would you extract it from the February 18th council meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Our next deputation is a request for water bill reduction for 55 Coburn Street East, Lindsay, item 9.4, and it's Mackenzie Baker and Devin Thompson. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for taking your time. My name is Mackenzie Baker. I live at 55 Colborne Street East. On October 8th, we received a bill for $945.57. That was for the water consumption of 156 cubic meters. Now, all our other bills have been at the consumption of around 23 to 25 cubic meters. So immediately I reached out to the water department. From October 8th to January 7th, there has been over 25 calls placed. With each call placed, we were told that request to speak further about the matter was passed along to Linda Leotti, who is part of the Revenue and Taxation Department, as well as email sent December 16th with no response. There was an initial conversation at the beginning of the process, early October, to determine if there was a leak. We went through the processes that were recommended by the water department to determine there was no leak through the billing period of July 1st to September 30th. We, were in and out of our house. We weren't away on vacation. There was no reasons for water consumption to be over 4 times the amount. Unfortunately, throughout this process from October till now, we still have not had a response from the department after emails have been sent. There was one phone call placed on October 29th and a message was left. I then returned that call immediately that day, followed by 2 others. It was not returned. I was told to pay a fraction of the bill and that somebody would be in contact about inspecting the water meter. After October 29th, we have not had any form of communication with the water department. We have placed calls after October 29th, and I find it hard to move forward with paying a bill when I believe that there is something wrong here.
Is that it?
Okay. That is all I have to present, yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's get a motion to receive the deputation. Deputy Mayor McDonald, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Richardson, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, just a quick question. So after that initial billing, like moving forward now, are you seeing that type of water consumption or has it returned to normal?
No, it is at a normal rate.
Thank you. So, like the previous speaker, your deputation will be forwarded to council, and I'm sure the deputy mayor will pull it out for discussion and refer it to staff, and subsequently somebody will get back to you. Okay?
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We have a motion and a seconder. All in favor? And that's passed. Item 9.5, deputation, is an overview of the challenges and impact that the rare disease community has on the City of Kawartha Lakes economy. We have Mr. Manley Lavender. Mr. Lavender, you have 5 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Yes, I just wanted to provide an overview on the impact of the rare disease community that I'm part of. I have a rare disease. And according to Muscular Dystrophy of Canada, over $1.5 billion is lost to our Canadian economy as a result of rare disease community. Over 3 million Canadians are diagnosed with a rare disease, and 2/3 of those people are children. Over 40,000 are diagnosed with my disease, which is called myasthenia gravis in Canada, and unfortunately that number is always going up. Many are living without diagnosis. I lived almost 8 years without being diagnosed, which was a huge impact for myself. Real direct impact on our local economy. Patients and caregivers are no longer working full-time or even part-time. The strain on our healthcare system is always growing. Most rural communities cannot offer the care needed due to their specialized treatment. My medical special team is down in Toronto. My secondary treatment is in Durham, and I do have physio and nutrition people locally in town. And that's basically because it's such a rare disease that there are no one that is qualified to care for my disease, and now I'm just one person. Benefits are covered for about 80%, and most rare disease medication is not covered under OHIP, so that is out of pocket. Investment and spending change as priorities change due to living with rare disease. Personally, my wife and I moved from Whitby to Lindsay in 2017 with plans of retiring, but still working as a consultant and or facilitator or other. I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis in July 10th of 2021, pretty specific because it changed my life. Almost 8 years living without diagnosis. My wife retired early as a teacher of 30 plus years, as she was my number one caregiver, so she could not manage a classroom, having to go to appointments every other day down in Toronto, so she decided to retire early. My income dropped by over 70%. I am now on a CPP with some income available to me as I continue to get better and stronger. We had to readjust our retirement plans to accommodate our income change. My wife and I are well-educated, professional-minded people wanting to contribute to our local economy and community. And my story is just one of tens of thousands of stories that are living with a rare disease. Now that number does not reflect Kawartha Lakes because we don't have the population, but there are hundreds of people just like me living in Kawartha. Some of us are diagnosed and most of them are probably not diagnosed and not knowing why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Today, my treatment plan is working, allowing me to resume my consulting services part-time. I am now become an advocate for the rare disease community across Canada and locally. I am doing talks to community groups, advocate groups, healthcare professionals. I'm now learning to live with different expectations. I used to be a triathlete, ice hockey official. I used to be that person that I wouldn't stop. I was hiking, I was educating people, I was a varsity coach, I was everything that I wanted to be, and then I hit my 50s and my life changed because of the diagnosis. What I'm hoping from council is that they become more aware of the rare disease community. On the 28th of February every year is World Rare Disease Day. There's always activities going on in Ottawa, but I encourage the city of Kawartha Lakes to become more involved. For myself, myasthenia gravis, June is National Myasthenia Gravis Month. Our colors are teal, and it would be amazing if we could have some kind of acknowledgement from the city, whether it's lighting up the city council or city buildings at some point, some day, some hour during the month of June. I have personally had the CN Tower lit up for the last 3 years for a day, actually 15 minutes in June, and I also got the Niagara Falls lit up for 15 minutes on a day in June, and I've done that just by filling out an application online. And then there are other people across Canada that get their own city council buildings lit up in teal at any point in time throughout the month of June. So, so if you could make more awareness, even better, hire people in the community that are living and working with a rare disease, because we walk amongst you. We don't look like we have a disease until you ask us to do something physical, smile, talk, swallow, chew something, pick something up, or walk a couple of blocks without any type of aid. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on, we'll see if there are any questions for you, but first we'll get a motion to receive your deputation. Councillor Perry, seconder, Deputy Mayor McDonald. Questions, comments? I think we received a letter from you as well that I know the assistant to the mayor is talking to the clerk's department about, so it is being considered, and somebody will be back to you about the lighting up of City Hall in June. So
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Joyce apparently has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I read up on your rare disease. I have never heard of it until now. So my question to you is one of the symptoms is difficulty talking in terms of conversing. You have to speak slower with some people with this disease. With that in mind, the Municipal Act says you get 5 minutes to present in front of council. Should we be more accommodating and allowing more time for people that present with this particular disease?
You know what? We are considered a snowflake disease. So if you were to ask me to do that, say at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when I wasn't diagnosed, you might get 30 seconds out of me. Now that my treatment plan is really, really working well, my wife says, "Oh, I wish you could go back when you couldn't talk." So it is very circumstantial, but that is a nice consideration because everyone's going to be different, and 5 minutes is no problem for me. But if you were to ask me 2 years ago, I couldn't speak for more than 30 seconds or maybe a minute, and my speech would start to slur. And as someone who is a former educator, it was devastating for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, we have mover and seconder, all in favor. And that's passed. Thank you very much for coming today. And as I said, we did receive your correspondence.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, moving backwards in the agenda, we'll now look at, what are we going to look at? Transportation Master Plan, update presentation. Our old friend Mr. Farquhar is here to lead us through that. All right, our young friend Mr. Farquhar is here. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an old soul anyways, so. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, thank you for being here today to receive the City of Kawartha Lakes update to the Transportation Master Plan. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the work done by Mr. Joseph Kelly, Supervisor of Traffic Technical Services, as well as the project manager, Castle Prince, who is online today to answer any questions. He is with our consultant, Aegis, who began the project back in 2023. On December 10th, 2024, staff and Aegis Consulting presented to Council an overview of the final transportation plan update that took the shape of different parameters, policy frameworks that were used to develop it. The objectives of the master plan can be broken down into the following 4 points. Assessing the existing state of the city's transportation network, which is the roads, intersections, bridges, and traffic light intersections, including recommendations for the network optimizing for improvements to address the growth in travel demand up to 2051. 2, improving mobility across all transportation modes that is safe, connected, sustainable, and accessible for residents. 3, reviewing the active transportation network gaps and opportunities to better integrate the city's communities through efficient and safe infrastructure. And 4, developing a sustainable transportation network implementation plan that reflects future development scenarios for short-term, medium-term, and long-term growth to sustain the city's infrastructure needs. This process began in November of 2023 with public meetings in Fenelon Falls and Lindsay, which outlined the existing conditions of the city's traffic network, being its roads, corridors, and intersections, as well as identifying the goals of the project. In October of 2024, the city, with its consultants, held another public information center in Fenelon Falls and in Lindsay, which presented analysis of the future conditions of the city's traffic network and proposed future infrastructure upgrade needs. In addition to that, it presented recommendations for policies to help the network become a multimodal system. The policies that have been proposed to help transform the city's network into a multimodal system, as identified in the staff report, as well as the TMP, are as follows. 1, Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is a strategy that encompasses education, enforcement, engineering, evaluation, and engagement with the ultimate goals of eliminating death and serious injuries within the city's road network. 2, Traffic calming policies is a systematic procedure for initiation, investigation, evaluation, implementation of traffic calming measures for existing and future roadways within the City of Kawartha Lakes. 3, speed limit policy are guidelines for determining speed limits based on a thorough assessment of road conditions, traffic patterns, and community needs, which aim to create safe and reliable transportation networks. Number 4 was an always stop warrant policy, which aims to enhance intersection safety by determining the appropriateness of always stop controls based on established criteria. Number 5 was the goods movement strategy, which provides guidance in managing truck haul activities and balancing operational needs with community impact. Number 6 was the road infrastructure guideline, which is a revision to guidelines which outline road design preferences for new roads proposed through development applications. And number 7 was the transportation impact assessment guidelines, are a structural framework that outlines the expectations and requirements of traffic impact studies in development applications. These policies and other policies can be found on Chapter 8 of the TMP. In addition to the policies, the TMP lays out a recommendation plan for infrastructure improvements to the city traffic network, broken out between short-term, medium-term, and long-term projects. Table 1 of the staff report summarizes the recommendations from the 2012 TMP that have been identified as either completed or labeled as priority updated status. So Table 1 indicates the 2025 TMP that has identified new recommendations related to the improvement and/or has adjusted the timeline based on the new analysis. In staff's report in tables 2 and 4, you will see the overall recommendations broken out into short, medium, and long-term implementation horizons by the communities. These tables will also, in these tables, you'll also see estimated costs for these projects for design, construction costs, and 2025 dollars. However, land costs are not included in this table at this time. Short-term identified as now to 2031 at a cost of just over, at a cost of almost 24 million. Medium term identified out to 2031 to 2041 at a cost of approximately 24.5 million, and long term from 2041 to 2051 at a cost of just over 24 million, for a total estimate cost of just approximately 72,500,000 over the horizon from now to 2051. These projects are based on data growth assumptions known in 2025. However, changes to growth, development, travel demand could alter recommendations and timelines. As such, the document will be treated as a living document and continually reviewed as how it integrates with our master plans and long-term financial plans. At this time, staff recommends that the report ENG 2025-007, 2025 Transportation Master Plan Update Study completion be received, that the 2025 Transportation Master Plan Update in the form attached as Appendix A to the report ENG 2025-007 be endorsed by Council as the City of Kawartha Lakes long-term transportation strategy and policy direction, and that staff be authorized to publish the notice of completion of the municipal class environmental assessment, planning and design process for the 2025 Master Plan Update, and file a Class EA project file report for the legislated 30-day comment period. And that this recommendation be brought forward to Council for recommendation at the next regular Council meeting. The Class EA project file report is available on the City's website, as well as hard copies will be posted at the Clerk's office, the Lindsay Library, and the Fenland Falls Library for the legislated 30-day period comment. If there's any questions for myself, for Mr. Kelly, or for Mr. Prince, I'm ready to answer any.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the presentation? Councilor, well, let's first get a motion to receive the presentation. Councilor Warren, seconder. Councilor Perry. Councilor Warren, you have a question.
I do. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mike, for the presentation. Going through the report, I'm
we're
really
taking
excited
questions on the presentation. We'll get to the report in a
yes,
minute.
so this is, yes, I'm getting to the question. Thank you very much. So at Mill Street, there is Mill and 36. It's been identified, but there's been nothing really put to it. So I'm just wondering what plans you have for that intersection. Maybe with all the other intersections, it maybe would slow down, but that's my question.
Can you hold that question till we get to the report?
Sure, that's fine.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the presentation? Seeing none. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you. Mr. Farquhar or Mr. Kelly, did you want to say anything about the report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I said, it's been an engagement process since 2023 with the public, internal stakeholders, agencies, as well as Indigenous groups through the municipal Class EA process that this master plan has followed, that has helped bring us to developing the master plan that Council has before it currently. So we feel it is, like I said, it is a living document, much like the other master plans that have been before you, that we'll review yearly for any updates based on the project priority as well as budget costing.
Thank you. Would you like to answer Councillor Warren's question about Mill Street and Bobcaygeon?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. So in regards to Mill Street and Bobcaygeon, so it was reviewed, I believe, within the TMP. There is no current recommendation in the short or medium or long term that I see. However, as you mentioned, within the short and believe medium, we have identified projects, and a couple of them are carryover projects from the 2012 TMP at locations at Boyd Street and Canal Street in 36, as well as Duke Street 36 and Canal, that we have designed and budget for and will be constructing this year for new traffic lights. King Street and 36 do have identified improvements within the plan, and that could have led us to mitigating needs or concerns at Mill Street. But I can ask Mr. Prince if he had anything further to add to that.
Mr. Prince.
Thank you, Mike, and good day, everyone, and through you. With regard to specifically to Mill Street, as Mike alluded to, it's been identified for further consideration given the intensification that we anticipate to occur on 36. So the intersection itself is to be reviewed further through various future horizons given increases in traffic and further improvements required north of that intersection.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that. Within the report, it does say like a core study for that area. So I'm assuming that will take into effect that intersection. But will the active transportation plan feed into a core study of specifically that area?
With regard to the active transportation plan, it would have identified areas of improvement and gaps within the network that need to be addressed. And what we'll do, the intention would be for both the TMP and the ATMP to work cohesively to ensure that as improvements to the road network and road intersections take place, that also takes into consideration the recommendations of the ATMP. So both the needs of vehicular traffic and the needs of active transportation are addressed at the same point in time.
Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor, just to add to that, you can refer to, I believe it's page 145 to 147 of the TMP, and it's an actual integration plan for the active transportation plan and how we should integrate it and use it when we're doing projects as recommended through the TMP.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very detailed. Just a couple of one comment and then a question. One question would be, when we're looking at that medium and that long-term build-outs, are we taking inflation into, like, you're giving us some hard numbers here. I'm just wondering how these numbers will bode like 20 years out.
Thank you. I'll defer the question to Mr. Prince in regards to the forecasted numbers for growth.
Mr. Prince.
With regard to the forecasted numbers do take into consideration inflation up to 2025. However, further inflation beyond 2025 per the identified horizons of 2041, 2051 have not been included in the estimation.
Thank you, because I thought it looked cheap. Just a comment there.
Yeah.
And another one, just obviously, we are focusing on based on growth and, moving through this report, and we're focusing on our higher urban areas when it comes to that, just making sure that we're keeping our eye on our rural areas too, because those transportation needs are changing as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so just to build on that answer to Councillor Richardson, so the dollars that you see today are in 2025 dollars. So these projects get identified in our long-term financial plan, and through the long-term financial plan, those inflation costs then are adjusted year by year.
Director, did you want to say something?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to mention exactly what Mr. Farquhar said. It's not unique to the Transportation Master Plan. All master plans or all asset plans are done that way. Through our asset management plan and our long-term financial plan, we ask the departments to give it to us in current day dollars, and the adjustments are made in the financial plan to accommodate for inflation, product increase, whatever it may be. So everyone's comparing apples to apples. The current day plans are then put into another vehicle, financial vehicle, that then adjusts for inflation and so on.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, it's not a question, it's just a comment that I see in the traffic calming policy that the speed humps are included. I can tell you now that this councillor is totally against those. If your house is burning down or you're having a heart attack, you don't want emergency services slowing down over speed humps. So I'm in favor of all kinds of traffic calming policies except that one. So something to keep in mind in future. Thank you.
We'll have a good discussion about that at some point. I have, shows my ignorance probably, but when I saw the title Transportation Master Plan, I went, oh boy, it's going to talk about expansion of bus routes, and maybe it's going to talk about rural transportation and stuff. And then I read it, and of course it wasn't in there. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but where do those kinds of things get addressed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council. So it does allow for the inclusion in the TMP. You'll see as part of the background information is our current our current transit plan, master plan. It is, like I said from the start, we looked at this as a multimodal review of our entire traffic network. So the multimodal means looking at travel by rail, by road, pedestrians, by water, so involving everything. So that's why you see in the appendices, you see all the recognitions and inclusions of our current transit master plan, our current parking strategy, our GMS, many different current plans. That way, when we do pull off the transportation master plan off the shelf to start using it for different projects, for large-scale construction projects, large corridor improvements, we're acknowledging and using all that information to develop options, the best options to proceed for these big projects. It also helps us to connect with provincial and federal projects as they happen, acknowledging some of our constraints, potentially with connecting to rail or any other provincial project or federal that could come through our jurisdiction.
Thank you. Director Robinson?
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, just to add to Manager Farquhar's comments there, the Transit Master Plan is the document you're looking for that houses all the information for rural transit, localized transit expansion, connection to other municipalities and so on. That is currently out for tender for review for a renewal in 2025. So you'll see more information about that this year.
Thank you. I know that folks who are listening out there, it is, and I've been approached about meeting with a group who's talking about rural transit and connections and other things. And so I thought it was an opportune time to try and get that information out there. Okay, thank you. We have a mover and seconder. Do we have a mover? We don't. So I need a mover and seconder. Sorry, do you have another question, Councillor Warren?
No, I was just going to move it.
You're moving it as printed?
Absolutely, yes.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Perry, does anybody want me to read it out, or you're good? Everybody good? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor as printed with a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for coming today, and I'm sorry you were so delayed. You know, just the way things were.
That's okay. I had a lovely lunch.
Good. Moving on in our agenda, and not backwards. Consent matters. That all of the proposed recommendations shown in section 11.1 of the agenda be approved by the Committee of the Whole in order that they appear on the agenda sequentially numbered and forwarded to Council for consideration at the next regular Council meeting. I have a mover and seconder. Councillor Richardson. Councillor Deputy Mayor McDonald. All in favor? And that's passed. Other new business, item 12.1 is a memorandum regarding support of a request for the redistribution of provincial land transfer tax and GST by Councillor Warren, and it is to support a resolution from the town of Aurora. Councillor Warren, do you want to speak to it?
Just briefly, it makes sense that we can at least try to get a piece of that. So I hope that gets supported.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Perry. Anybody have any questions or comments? Seeing none. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you. And last but not least, we have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Yeo, Councillor Joyce. All in favor? And that's done. Thank you all for coming today. Sorry for bouncing around the agenda, but trying to get everything done in a timely manner. Thanks for your support and help. Have a good day.